3, 2, 1.
Saving the day.
Can't believe it! Look at this!
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to the September OCC Clash. We're going to bring you some great action today. But before we do, we want to take a look at who's coming, what they're bringing, and just do a little preview of what you guys are going to see today. So we're going to start out by taking a look at the bracket for you this morning. We have Spoker against Head, Green Lemon against Rook, No in 5 against Dark, and Tanshan against M4N. So yeah, lots of familiar faces, but also plenty of new ones. Um, Thanatron, would you like to start us off today by taking a look at some of these players for us?
Yeah, sure. Let's take a look at Head's deck.
Yeah, let's take a look at.
Or the player
Uh,
profile, rather. I apologize. So, Head with a strong 371 matches, 260 wins, very solid 70% win rate. Anything out of the 60s into the 70s is always super, super impressive. Season finished 7th, so, not in our top 2, had to battle it out through quals, but that's always super respectable. Head always with a fantastic head of hair as well. And what we've got today with Head, we've got a German US deck to start out with. We can see this as a little bit more mid-rangey, kind of backing off of some of the more bigger ramp decks we've seen in some of the more recent months here. We do see, of course, a couple of actually, no, I don't see any war machines in here. I expected some war machines. So Head totally eschewing any kind of ramp. We are much more strict here with a very unit-based deck, all the way down to his Panzergrens, his Schützens, some of the bigger units. The Zestor is very nice, not having the op costs when they come into play. So a very solid deck here. It looks like, of course, the Comet to finish it out. And then we move on to a new variation of, I'm not quite sure whether to call it frontline. Obviously, it is a US deck with 4 Sherman, so it's definitely going to have a frontline presence. Definitely hopes to draw off that frontline. But now we see some one really big addition in that P51, right? Just a gigantic plane that can provide some buff and draw if it's not taken care of. But we see him going with a Japanese ally here, going maybe a little bit faster with some things like the TK earlies, and then the new Shibata regiment, of course, providing that extra burn damage to any opponent willing to play orders while those are out. That definitely has a big effect when trying to sort of outrace something that's kind of trying to get you down fast. And then Head's third deck here, we see what a lot of us have become pretty familiar with, this Exile Brit Air, where it is basically the Brit Air shell, and then you are running a lot of Polish Exile Air, as well as that French MS-406, of course, as a 3/3 fighter with the Exile tag, and those 2 big Hammer Homes providing all that Exile synergy. Hammer Home providing a huge buff and duplication of one of your exiled planes, so you can truly just race someone's face down with these big fighters.
Thank you so much, Thanatron. Yeah, very exciting. Lots of different stuff, but it does look pretty strong. Exile we're familiar with, but some of the other decks are pretty creative, pretty new. Thank you so much. Next up, we're going to be looking at Spoker, and Cornguy, if you would do the honors.
Alrighty. So Spoker's coming out really strong with a 74% win rate. It's launching him up all the way to first place on the month, costing him just a measly 1,000 matches. Very strong. Most played is Brit and Exploit the Gap as his favorite card. Let's see if he can exploit the gap with these 3 decks he's bringing. First off, we're seeing a Brit ramp, a little different from what you'd normally see, with some of these cards coming in, such as Royal West Kent's Cromwell and the Canadian division. Cromwell just being a decent 4K guard, which is also a tank with heavy armor. Definitely is a pretty beefy thing if you can't, suppress it or go around it. If you have to go through it, watch out. And interestingly enough, it does suppress a unit if it is pinned, and the only way that will come into effect is with the Sexton Albacore. And let's just throw in a Secret Ops to see if we can catch you lacking. So yeah, definitely interested to see how these 4K guards go out. So then moving over to, there is a US Brit ramp list, and it has a moderate amount of ramp. It's trying to, get some big bombers from Production Order and Bomber Mafia, and then just control the board, with some guards, with some Hellcats, with some US tools, until it can play its big bombers at the end of the match. And then moving over, we got this German and Brit control list. You could say discard, but I don't personally think that there's enough to label it completely discard. You got the MI5, you got the Annihilation. There is no Wolfpack, but there is a lot of control tool. Throw in a Reichsbank and see if you can come out on top. I will note with this, there's not a lot of AoE, so he's definitely going to have to play efficiently with this list, and it could definitely happen. 3 Pack 40s, definitely liking this new post balance patch, Pack 40, and I have to say it's a pretty fun card to be able to get a draw off of, and that's Spoker's list.
Thank you so much. All right. Next up, Jking, if you would be so kind as to take us through Noan's lists.
Of course. So no one here coming in as Seed 2, meaning that he qualified directly into this tournament by placing in the top 2 with a whopping 74% win rate, 780 games. I don't think we'd really expect anything less here from Noan. Favorite card, War Machine. That is definitely seen in the decks he has a track record of bringing. But let's check now if he has War Machine in any of the decks he's bringing here today. So we saw Spoker, who was Seed 1, so the other player who qualified directly off of ladder, bringing 3 control lists. And Noan is taking this in a very different direction. So first up, he has Japan, German, Aggro, and this is a deck we are very familiar with, but there's a few cards in here that we might not be familiar with from previous patches. So the recent balance patch that just dropped came with a bunch of cards that were reworked coming out of reserve and being added to the game, and those are having a big impact in the meta and a big impact in Noan 5's deck lists, with 4 copies of Shibata Regiment and a copy of Pack 40 in Jagro as well. This is just such a powerful removal tool to be able to answer early game pressure. And then on top of just the regular Jagro stuff, all of the 1-drops, the expansions for card draw, 35 Ts to put on the pressure, and then Shiden, Panzer Grenadiers, Dragon Slayer shoots in at the top end just to get in damage against the opponent. Moving on to his second deck, this is a German-US deck, and there is 4 copies of the War Machine, Noan's favorite card. And this is a very fascinating deck to me, because this is not a typical ramp deck. This is much more mid-range. It's much more unit-based, trying to stay on the board, going toe-to-toe with the opponent. But then there is a few very odd inclusions, based on what we might have previously seen, with 3 copies of Reichsbank, which is going to allow for very powerful pop-off turns, a copy of Enigma to refill the hand after one of these turns, and then a copy of Blitzkrieg, not too abnormal, new copy of Breakthrough, one of the newly brought in cards, which will also help reduce operation costs. But then on the top end, the cards that you're wanting to play with those big Reichsbank turns is there's a Leopold, an Alpenfestung, a Panzer IV, and a Hipper, and then 4 copies of the Pack 40. So this deck is going to be, even though there's War Machines and there is a lot of ramp, there's not necessarily a lot of high-end cards that you're ramping into, but there is a lot of cards, period, that you're going to be able to play on the board all at once. And in certain situations, one of these few high-end cards can come down and completely change the game. I'm especially excited to see Alpenfestung, if this is a tech card that could win him a game, because this is a card we have not seen in this type of deck really before. And then his third deck, not headed in the direction of the Brit-Poland Exile, but still a very aggressive British deck. It is Brit Japan Air, And this is, with Japan Air, is not something we've seen in a while, but of course you have the 3 air superiorities, the regular air package with the Swordfish, Gladiators, Close Air Supports, Sea Embargoes, etc. But what I really love coming in with the Japan package here is 2 copies of Out the Mist, 1 copy of Commit the Reserves, so this is going to make the deck much better into aggro starts, especially if it's starting going second. And then the Commit the Reserves is just such an efficient removal. I absolutely love this card. And then on the top end, 2 copies of Winter Regiment, again, just an incredibly efficient unit. So this is not going to necessarily have the same struggles as other air decks in the past with trying to stay relevant on board after the first board wipe. With so many pack 40s running around in the meta, you would expect at least a few board wipes coming in. But also there's a single copy of ATS in this list, which, I mean, normally we see ATS paired with cards like, I'm forgetting the name of the card, but normally you see that it paired with cards that deal 3 damage directly from hand. There's not really anything like that coming out from no one, so I'm very excited to see how exactly he's going to be using this ATS, but it can theoretically be triggered on his opponent's turns by Shibata, which is a very fun potential draw condition for this deck. But that's no one's lineup as a whole, very, very aggressive, going to be trying to put his pressure on the opponent, and that's the No One Classic.
It really is, isn't it? Thank you very much, Jking. So, next up we have Noan's opponent in the first round, Dark. Let's take a look at Dark's player profile. So Dark is a relative newcomer to the competitive scene, although qualifying with only 297 total matches played and 31st season finish. So more or less barely making it into top 34, but extremely efficient in the number of games played. I mean, 297 is a very low number. You know, if you don't need to get any higher than that, then then why go through all that work? But long Tom favorite card, very interesting. Let's take a look at the deck. First up, we have a classic Japan-Germany Jagro. It is playing Winter Regiment, which is an interesting choice. It's really good in the mirror and in sort of mid-range matchups where salvaging some of your opponent's cards would be really helpful, and having like a constantly healing unit as well. Next up, we have a Germany USA mid-range list. It's looking to play some early war machines. But we get to see the newly reworked Suppression as well as the Pack 40, 2 copies of it. Suppression is a really nice card that suppresses and draws if you have an air unit, so I think we're going to be seeing a lot of that in the upcoming months. Really, really nice card to suppress and draw at the same time. And then lastly, we have a Britain USA ramp list, and it is looking to win with big bombers like Lancaster, Wellington, and Halifax, and control the board up until that point with stuff like Wave After Wave and Glamour Boys. But yeah, very, very interesting lineup. Really excited to see some of these new cards. All right. And next up, why don't we have Thanatron? Would you mind going over Green Lemon for us?
Sure. So Green Lemon back in the OCC once again, playing about 400 matches and winning 76%. I believe that is the highest win rate we've seen so far. Super impressive. A 3rd place season finish, bit of a heartbreaker there. First and second obviously getting auto-qualled, 3rd being the highest seed to still have to play through the qual. That is tough sledding, but Green Lemon no problem able to push through it. We can see also a fan of the US decks and their Greyhound, which is in, you know, a lot of US decks. Let's take a look at what he will be wielding today. So first off, we have a US German. This is a much more traditional frontline look, all the way down to the single copy of Stars and Stripes, even kind of going a bit throwback with it with the 2 We Can Do It's. haven't seen two weakened Duets in a front line in quite a bit. But we have the, the normal German counterparts here with the double Blitzkrieg. We do have one of the newly changed Pack 40 as well, and a couple of the newer-ish Jaeger regiments providing some extra draw, and then of course your 35Ts, and also of course on your US end, your Shermans. We have 3 M10s, no half-track, so we're definitely going with the suppress angle, which I think is probably the right call still, even after the most recent patch. Moving on, we go into a Brit US deck. This is a much more traditional ramp deck, but we do see some of the reserved cards that have been changed and come back come into play here as well, with the Cromwell and Royal West Kents, as Korn astutely pointed out, that new Cromwell having a bit of pin tech will go with those Albacores and that Sexton really well. And then of course just being a heavy armor tank guard is very, very nice for the deck. ASW patrol as well, providing some very, very large credit increases, and hopefully perhaps, or will perhaps with US being the side, a random removal. And then lastly, we see a Legions deck, I believe the only one of the day, but a pretty traditional here, Japan Poland Legions, with the only two copies of Plan West, but we have all 4 copies of Stretch the Line, so kind of relying on that Stretch the Line, the newer Legions card, to provide the majority of your Legions, and then of course your Tutar now, and the rest of the normal Japan shell. Shibata being added as a newer card as well, providing a little bit of burn, just something, it's a 1/3, so it's a solid 1-drop body, and forces the other player to really think about their turn order and kind of how they're going to do certain things, and maybe even forcing someone late game to spend removal on a 1-cost unit because they can't handle that burn for more than 1 card or 1 order. So can definitely have some huge effects, really prevalent in a lot of the decks today, so we'll see how much Shibata has to say.
Next up, Cornguy, would you be so kind as to take us over to Rook?
I would love to. Rook out here taking a look at me through that camera lens. Very nice profile picture for Rook. Likes the Nashub as a very strong engineer, can get you a lot of credits, and definitely likes the game with 1,000 games played last month. 64% win rate is going to put him at 19th, and he's going to qual in the qualifier matches to get here. And before we look at his decks, make sure you have a chair and you are sitting down, because these decks might take you off your feet. I'm excited to break them down. Boom! Rook is bringing the heat with this US-German Reichsbank ramp list. He is trying to get large and in charge with this list. He is trying to get big units and cheese them out through Mayhem and Special Assignment. 4 copies of Land of the Free and 1 copy of Victory March, trying to reduce their operation costs. But why would you want to reduce their operation costs? Because this deck also has a 3 operation cost, with Jasco, with Les Terribles, and then into the 4th Marines, Panther G, Tiger IH, not to mention the US super heavy units of Pershing and Super Fortress. This is going to be a fun one to watch. Definitely get your popcorn if you can see this list. Definitely go ahead and play this list, queue into Jking, Seal Zelo, I don't know. Definitely be fun list. Unique too. So moving over to this Brit France control list. I say control, you could say nil. It definitely likes to draw cards and likes having the opponent draw cards as well. So looking in, we got 1 copy of Honey to profit from all the card draw. 4 copies of Honor and Loyalty. 4 copies of Compromise. Definitely trying to keep the hands full and the cards flowing, and remove any threats, with the Infinite Depth with the Honor and Loyalty. And then we're going to see one copy of First Responders. Definitely liking First Responders recently. It is pretty fun to get those large guards. You know, am I floating Ultra? Am I floating First Responders? I guess that's for you to find out. Falling all the way up to some big top end, we got 2 carpet bombs. Love to see carpet bombs in a list. We got the Avre to if you wanted to play the cards and get them out of your hand, whoop, they are back in there for you. So we've got AoE, we've got target removal, we've got guards, and we've got a lot of fun on this list. And then moving over to probably the more standard of the lists, and by more standard I mean relatively heavy German ramp, with little anti-aggro tools. I mean, if you whoever gets into Rook, and if they have control lists, this deck is going to punish them. If they have aggro lists, let's see if Rook can hold on to it. So looking into it, you know, it's definitely got the top end. Trying to War Machine, indirect Spank, refill with Enigma. We got War Bonds, ASW Patrol to add to the credit advantage. And then we're going to slam Blitz Doctrine, get some buffs on our tanks, and then we're going to go. But, you know, we got to get there first. And that is the crux for this list.
All right, thanks so much. Jking, would you mind taking a look for us at Thanatron?
Of course. So, Thanatron is a player that I'm not that familiar with, but I mean, looking at his results, over 900 total matches this season, 69% win rate, favorite card Panzer Grenadiers coming in with a season finish of 4th place. So that's already just incredibly impressive stats from a player who personally, I'm not that familiar with, but it definitely seems like they are here to play. And I want to talk for a second here about their qualifier record, because out of the players in the qualifiers, Thanatron was the only one who went 5-0, and along that path, they beat Head, they beat Green Lemon, and they beat Rook, all of whom, those were their only losses in the series, and they qualified to this tournament. So Thanatron coming here with already big victories under his belt over other people in this tournament. Now, unfortunately, his first round opponent is, in fact, Dark, who is somebody he has not played, or not Dark, sorry, against M4N, who is somebody he has not played in qualifiers. So let's take a look at their deck lists, though, to see what they're bringing here to try to continue that very impressive unbeaten record from qualifiers. So first up, they have a Japan-German aggro deck. This is obviously very standard. Now, when it comes to looking at these types of decks, you have to, a lot of the cards will look very similar, but you're looking for very specific card, and you're looking for very specific card numbers. So, for example, the Shibata Regiment, this is a new card. People are still experimenting. We've seen some people with 3, some people with 4. Thanatron falls on the 3 copies of Shibata. And then at the top end of Jagro is where most of the questions get raised. Are you running Dragon Slayer? Are you running Winter Regiment? Are you running Panzer Grenadiers? Thanatron says yes to everything. 1 Winter Regiment, 2 Panzer Grenadiers, the Dragon Slayer. And there's also a single copy of the IJN Shenano, which is a card that has really fallen out of favor in Jagro. So its inclusion here is going to be very interesting to see if it's going to pay off or if it's going to fall flat, as we have seen it happen in times in the past. Then moving on to his second deck, he's liking that Japan-German aggro energy because his second deck is German-Japan aggro. This one does have a few different cards that Germany offers, so the crux of the deck is very similar. 3 copies of Shibata Regiment, 3 copies of 15th Cavalry Regiment, and then 35 Ts to go face. But Germany is going to allow him to run cards like 3 copies of Combined Arms, which can give him potentially explosive starts. Of course, the German elites with autocannon, the Admiral Hipper to get through guards, Comet for a bit of consistency at the top end, and then also there's 2 copies of the Pack 40, the Dragon Slayer, but alongside the Dragon Slayer is coming in with 2 Zerstors. So this is a slightly more heavy, but also slightly more explosive at the start if you can get an early Combined Arms off. So it's sort of best of both worlds, and then in the middle, of course, you have the autocannon and the 38 Ts to fill out the curve. And then continuing this with this very aggressive lineup, we see the third deck here is Brit Poland Legions. In qualifiers, they brought Brit US Ramp. They've decided to switch things up, bring a much more aggressive lineup here. And when you're looking at these, sorry, not Brit Poland Legions, Brit Poland Exile, my mistake. But when you're looking at these types of exile decks, the important thing to be looking for is what zero-cost countermeasures you run, because everybody can agree on about 35 cards in this deck, and then what you run after that point is very up in the air, and Thanatron is deciding on a bunch of zero-cost countermeasures, a copy of Evasive Action that can stop a very important deployment effect from suppressing one of your units or retreating one of your units, 2 copies of Unexpected Resistance, which is going to help out a lot against these more aggressive tempo-based decks that will try to take out your big planes with blitz tanks, and then 1 copy of the newly buffed Stubborn Defense, which can act as additional card draw and also just additional disruption to your opponent trying to remove your units from the board. And if Exile can stick units, it's going to win the game. So Thanatron, very aggressive lineup. I'm very excited to see if he can keep this unbroken winning streak he had in quals here in the top 8.
Thanks, Jking. Do you think that Panzer Grenadiers is going to be fast enough for Jagro still? I mean, not a lot of people are choosing to play it anymore after it's been nerfed to 5k. What do you think about that?
We've seen quite a few slower control ramp style decks that are running a lot of anti-aggro. They're running cards like Supply Priorities, and this is going to be able to answer the first wave from a deck like Jaguar. So I think the Panzer Grenadiers is maybe slotted in here as a bit of value that the Jaguar deck can get out if the game starts to go later against one of these control decks. It's going to be a bit slower in the mirror if they just having a 5-cost unit in your hand that's difficult to get out. But in these slower value matchups that we are definitely going to be seeing in this tournament, it's going to be awesome.
Great, I really appreciate it. Next up, we have M4N. So M4N is not a name that I'm super familiar with, coming in with 781 matches and mostly playing US and loving the card Blitz Doctrine, finishing 13th in the season with a 63% win rate. Let's take a look at what we have in store for us today. So M4N is first starting out with a US Germany frontline list, and this looks a lot more familiar to what I'm used to. We have the 20th Panzer Grenadiers, we have the Schutzen. We don't see any of the new cards in the pack 40s like some people are choosing, but I think this list is much more traditional, much more used to, we're much more used to seeing something like this. Then next up we have a Japan-Poland Legions, except for the fact that it includes 3 copies of Shibata, which is probably going to help it out in some of the matchups like versus Britain, which can be a very difficult matchup as Britain has lots of ward wipes and just has more value often per card than the Legions deck. So I am really looking forward to seeing how this deck looks with the addition of Shibata. And then last up we have a Britain US air list, which we have seen some people opt for Russia secondary, some people opt for US secondary, and we haven't seen a deck like this today, I think, despite being relatively popular on ladder, but we are still keeping Bomber Mafia in this list, despite the fact that it was nerfed to 3k. So I'm going to be interested to see
Three, two, one.
Saving the day.
Can't believe it! Look at this!
Hello and welcome to the September OCC. We are happy to be here. Happy you are here with us. I'm here with Cornguy, and we are going to get straight into today's action by bringing up our first matchup here. We have Head versus Spoker. Taking a look at our entire bracket, as I said, we have Head versus Spoker as our first matchup, followed by Green Lemon against Rook, No and 5 against Dark, and then Thanatron against M4N. Some new names this month, really cool. So we are going to get right into it. We're going to bring up the deck list just for a brief moment and get into our first match. Why don't you look at Spoker's decks for me here quick?
Spoker, we have Brit Ramp, US Ramp, and German Brit Control. Just trying to get it out, expecting his Brit Ramp to get banned.
Yeah, probably. I can see that logic. Taking a look at Heads decks real quick, we have a more mid-rangey German US. We have a more quick frontline with a Japan ally, and then of course the Exile Air that keeps everyone up at night. So our players are thinking about their bans, and I believe that bans perhaps are in. Who do you think is going to get banned for each side here, Corn?
Both. Britain from both.
Britain from both. Very popular ban, Britain. Probably the most tilting deck to play against. I don't know if you've been following some of our alt tournaments. Shout out Jking. But when you play Classic, as soon as you play Classic, Brit is the most tilting decks to play against, as we have seen recently. What I'm saying is I'm glad Monty and Schelling are dead. But Corn nailing the prediction. Both Brit decks banned right away. We who do you got in your bracket challenge, Corn? All-seeing Corn guy.
I have Spoker winning this match is my prediction. Just based off of looking at the deck lists and playing them, definitely favoring Spoker in this match. But I'm all here for Head to prove me wrong.
Indeed. Also very interesting, right? Those were pretty different Britain decks. One was Exile Air, very in your face, very quick, and then the other, I believe, was a ramp deck. So something that is going to take much longer. But getting into it here on our beautiful lacquered US board, we have both teams with their US decks. And Corn, in a matchup like this, where we again are kind of at like an aggro versus ramp situation here, who do you expect to come out on top in this particular game?
Well, this is going to be US Brit ramp versus US Japan frontline esque. I've got to favor the US Brit ramp here. What we're seeing with this ramp list is there's a lot of heal, there's a lot of guards, and head just doesn't seem to have the ability to pop off through it. Shibata is going to be a good one drop to try to give some hesitation, but
Yeah, absolutely. Also, really handy going against those albacores, right? You're not really concerned about your Shibata suffering that albacore. It gets pinned. It's fine. It's a slow moving unit. It can be a little slower. It's got 3 health as a one drop, so you're not really worried about that as well, especially in the realm when you have so many 164ths, ready to die to those albacores instantly.
just a turn pass from Spoker. It's not the worst.
I actually
Getting
like
that
that.
albacore.
I like that turn pass as well. Head starting to go just a little bit wide.
Yeah, yeah. But he doesn't have any cards to benefit from being wide besides just the fact that he's wide. Perhaps the
Yeah,
PIR can get some.
he's definitely going to hope, as you're kind of mentioning here. There is a distinct lack of buffs in the deck. There is no. I'm sorry. What is the Japanese? Give everything +2/+1, 3 cost buff.
So
Help me
supply
out.
run.
Naval supply run. Thank you. So no naval supply run, which could really provide that almost blitzkrieg like burst potential. And as far as we've referred a couple times to this deck being frontline esque or frontline like. It's got 4 Shermans, so I'm calling it frontline, baby.
Go ahead. Kind of an awkward turn here. Do you play the Glamour Boy and let it get slaughtered? Um, by these destruction effect buff cards, or do you try to trade out, perhaps slightly less creditly efficient, but taking less damage?
Yeah, I
That's
could see.
Spoker's
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
decision. I guess Glamour Boys is fine.
I agree with the Glamour Boys play. I could see a case being made for spending 1 credit to trade into the 3/1 with your 1/2, and then perhaps firebombing PIR. But you're also going to take 2 damage from the Shibata. The firebomb is going to kill PIR, but it's only going to throw out 2 damage after that, and you have 2 enemy units with 3 health, so not super efficient there. And we see Head using his turn 4 to Sherman out and draw basically exactly what he wants.
Yeah, this strategic bombing is gonna get a lot of value destroying the 2 units, but also that pseudo ramp by denying your opponent credits is definitely good to get that out on curve.
And that's 1 pesky Shibata gone, but I almost would expect to see Head come right back down with another one, just to keep all of those orders that a ramp deck wants to play costly. Ooh, supply priorities here being used not as an anti-aggro tool, but perhaps to fill the Sherman back to full health. Put a couple healths back on that scout car as well. I actually really like that play. We'll see if he chooses that or if he wants to take the front line. Would you take the front line or would you? Ooh, or go recon. Draw a
Yeah,
lot of
I'm
options here with
saving
this
that
1 credit.
supply priorities for draw, off of to damage my own recons here personally. It if you were playing against more of a aggro mirror, healing your units and jamming the front line, um, I would think more about healing my units in that case. But here, um, if you can't find Shermans, you're gonna want to ping your own units to your own recons to draw. And I'm fine with that. I wouldn't have minded healing my own units, but
Yeah, there was definitely quite a few different calls to be made there as well. Could have thrown another unit in the front line, and we saw him go with the recon to have that draw out. And now we'll see that Albacore taking out a Sherman. Pretty good.
Spoker has not ramped too much. It's seeming like a 3 credit advantage once the turn swings back to him. But Spoker's coming up on the Bomber Mafia turn, where he can really just do some damage to the board. Jasco pool. Let's go.
Probably not what Head wanted to see.
Save the HQ. So
Marauder been in Spoker's hand for a while.
interesting. Oh, this is just a brutal suppress. If he wants to suppress all of that, brutal in terms of just making some absolute duds.
Truly, truly. Wiping out quite a bit of card text off those three gentlemen.
He just took all that text and just wiped it off.
Deleted a full paragraph out of the game.
Just
99th, perhaps interesting, can maybe make one of those units useful. I could see him moving Skytrain up and throwing the 99th on it. A 2/6 unit is at least a unit.
oh, this is so gross. Um, I guess on a side note, with the new Shibata rework, we're not seeing any, push decks brought. Any
Yeah, it is an interesting point. We see here Head opting to use the Zero Forest, just a body blocker. Of course, it will still absorb a hit from these bombers. They will have to go through the fighter even though it doesn't have any attack power. But Head's hand, Devil's Brigade is nice, but the recon and the scout car are pretty wimpy stuff here. And Spoker really starting to get into the beef of his deck.
Yeah, plenty of options for Spoker and not a lot for Head.
And
Um,
every little health on that heavy armor bomber is just harder and harder to saw through for Head at this point.
yeah, and guess what? It can have a heavy armor guard coming up. Just team heavy, 2 team heavy guys talking about heavy armor. What else is new?
It's a perfect weekend. And a value trade on the Shibata, choosing to get 2 units out of the Hellcat is always nice. Pathfinder's gonna be good for Head here. 2 very obvious choices. Really just one obvious choice if we're being real. Now you may be thinking that one, oh no, is he gonna spend the credit? Oh, of course the backline. I got a little quick for my own britches there.
These
On
are
what I
not.
may have saw.
Yeah.
All of Head's turns, yeah, just nasty complicated. I would think that maybe you Devil's Brigade here and throw it to the front line, and then that sets you up next turn to be able to pathfind. Also interesting to put that on put the scout car buff onto the Skytrain, as if Spoker chooses to spend 3 to take a unit off the board, freeing up his ability to hit the back line by taking out the only fighter is probably in his benefit, and then also doesn't actually do a damage with the heavy armor. But yeah, the plenty of AoE as well. Bomber Mafia.
I really like that knife Spoker has on his table. Looks looks like he's large and in charge. Cromwell
As you
comes
said
down.
before,
Ah,
we're guarding.
we're guarding. Um, in my opinion, this is just a formality waiting, but Spoker or Head does have the strat bomb, and he
Yeah, we
has a hand
got a
full of
strap on this
tools.
turn. Can maybe set up Pathfinders in the Cromwell for next turn, but he's also staring another bomber in the face. Big J bomber. Which is a really nice get from Bomber Mafia, right? Bomber Mafia not as good as Production Order in the sense of it gives you the chance to get some real duds. Obviously, they're two different cards, so I'm really only speaking of, just the developing a bomber part, but oh, and that's a big deal for Freedom, putting that at 3 health out of Pathfinder's range, although with Devil's Brigade and the 2 supply priorities, it's not really a big deal, but Head needs a much bigger and better answer.
Spoker could just convoy here, try to get some cards. Ramping to 12 here is only gonna essentially net you 1 credit.
The beautiful War Bonds alternate art, really looking good.
Definitely. Shout out
Probably
War
one of
Bonds.
the better alternate arts, in my opinion. Takes the trade here, not the Pathfinders.
We got a big 1 damage to face coming in.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure about that play. I feel like taking Pathfinders there and then throwing I almost said Red Devils, a Devil's Brigade in the front line just feels better. But I guess knowing, that J Bomber is out, it's going to get suppressed instantly. Your Pathfinders maybe makes it feel worse. Oh, and a nice fighter to block the bomber here. But that 6/6 fighter providing some really nice destruction effects as well. 2/2 to the whole board, +2/+2 to the whole board for Spoker, and 2 draw.
Yeah, the Marauder triggering that destruction effect twice would be a nice thing. Unfortunately, it's a
Unless you're
destruction
Head.
effect and not a deployment effect.
Okay, now we're going to take double supply priorities so that we can get this onto the board. We can get that Marauder off the board, get the Pathfinders on. Chooses to move them up, which is interesting. I guess it really doesn't matter. It being a fighter and all could get targeted either way, so really not interesting. Another production order, Spoker just not lacking for huge, big planes.
Yeah, Spoker has no idea the menacing 164th that is in Head's hand, just waiting to buff a unit. No, but um yeah, I mean this is a rough matchup for Head. Just
He probably wants to make this trade, but he wants something on the board to make the trade, so he's perhaps thinking about throwing the J Bomber down, taking his suppress on the Pathfinders, which really isn't that big a deal, mostly just to get it down. If anything, he might like J Bomber to go back to his hand, but then he can make J Bomber huge by trading. Instead, he'll make a very nicely sized.
and there's the war machines. There you were hiding back there.
Yeah.
I was looking for you in the mulligan, my friends.
Head drawn dead. These are not when you want to see your 164ths. And at this point, Ramp has basically the full control of this game. Even though Spoker is
War
just
machine. War
drawing trips
machine.
war machine.
War machine.
Somewhere, no in 5 is pulling his collar away from his neck looking at that hand.
Yeah. No comment.
And taking those small buffs and destructions off.
And you might be thinking Spoker is winning on board, but he's also winning in card advantage too.
Yeah, looking pretty bleak for Head here. Can trade Hellcat for Hellcat, so he avoids 4 damage next turn, which will buy him a little time. But yeah, says not even worth it. Let's roll on to our next game here. So
So
Spoker getting a big win with his US deck, which means Head knows he's going up against Spoker's German. Would you take the mirror here, the German, or would you take that US Japan frontline right back and see if you can get under that German deck?
you have to win with both. It's really up to Head. Do you want to try the German match, or do you want to hard stick your US? You're gonna have to win with both. Do you want to come out of here as a 2-1 or an 0-2? Is my brutal opinion. I still think this is going to favor Spoker against the US list. Let's see. If I was in Head's spot, I would probably bring my German deck, but you have to win with both.
Yeah, at some point almost just to get to play your German deck in the set as well, right?
True. I would be frustrated with my US Japan and say I'm not going to bring you.
And we see here Head going right back to the US deck. No frustration. Spectator mode giving us just a tiny bit of trouble here. Please forgive us as we straighten that out.
Yeah, I mean, this match, can Spoker get enough targeted,
We can
get enough value early on
we
is
can
going to
see
be
Spoker's his early hand here, and he has that initial bank and that initial 15 off.
taking a quick step away while we look at that spectator um, refresh to get you guys the action crisp and not stale. That is why we are here.
Only the crispest action.
So Head can definitely win with this US list. Spoker, this control list can definitely draw dead, but what he's definitely looking for is certainly his German engineer, the Nashub. That would provide a tremendous amount of value. Um,
Yeah, certainly with all the if Head is again, Head is playing his US deck, which we saw that he was, right? That
mhm.
Noxshib is going to have plenty of things on board to capitalize off of.
You're
Now we
definitely
take you
getting,
to looks like between turns 3 and 4 here in the action.
yeah, and the fact that this is what the board looks like on turn 4 is definitely favoring Spoker. We got a red.
9 credits on turn 4, baby. Your Shibata gone. You didn't see the bank, but it happened. It's here.
Yeah, we come back to turn 4. Spoker has 9 credits. You might be wondering, did he ramp? No, he banked.
Just full board clear. Already has the front line against front line.
We could see, now bear with me, we could see the ambush artillery in the front line just to be annoying.
That would be very annoying.
The
And another
Jazzco,
Jazzco.
let's go.
There is a very
You,
common school of thought these days that Skytrain is just not worth bringing anymore because the pool that it is able to summon one drops from is just no longer good. There's a lot of duds. However, even a deuce would be probably better in this situation than these two Jaskos.
No, you definitely want to bring it in ramp so that you don't have to bring Jasco because you could just have a Jasco printer.
That's a good point.
Yeah, but after Red Devils is rotated, definitely
Nasty hit
not.
the drop point.
Yeah, that double damage to tanks gone. See ya. The deuce. Oh
The
man.
deuce asking you shall receive. We also saw a nasty hit the drop point take, basically suppress that Hellcat, which means that it no longer had blitz. So it came out with, no gas in the tank and is easy pickings for that new pack 40.
No gas in the tank.
No gas in that tank's tank. And this is just looking worse and worse for our guy Head. Uh, this could be a very quick 2-0 for Spoker.
Start
And what
the
do you even do
buses.
here if you're Head?
Start the
You just
buses. We're going home early.
he just hope he hopes that he doesn't get another deuce, another Jasco, gets a little bit more decent of a one drop. But man, that artillery is just rough. You can M10 it and take the ambush off, make it a little easier to trade into. But the problem at this point is just having something to get over there and trade into it with.
And we love Head, definitely fan favorite, but just from my observation and testing, the US Japan list was not going to get it done today, just like we saw it play out.
And this also really speaks to Spoker, right? He was first, didn't have to play the quals, first in the month. I don't quote me, but I want to say that might be the first time that he got first overall on ladder at the end of a month.
Not quoting you on that.
Thank you. And his tournament play, it's just been improving and improving. And anytime you're able to take his tournament set against a player as great and then, as advanced, maybe even storied, right, as Head, in such a fashion as well as what we're seeing is really, really, really excellent play from Spoker. Yeah, and I don't see how in any universe this can shape out any differently.
One credit off to the last man, unfortunately.
Yeah, we might see Head with the 20 health, scoop. Yeah,
Oh
that's
no.
the 20 health scoop does not feel good, ladies and gentlemen, but hard fought. Sometimes it's just, the decks that you brought weren't the decks to win with today. So really valiant effort by both our players there, and congrats to Spoker as he continues a dominant march through this month.
Yeah. And I mean, it played out how we expected, but definitely I'd feel bad for Head. I mean, I've been there before. It definitely stinks. Don't know what he saw preparing for that, but
Yeah, the
I
US
guess
Japan definitely has, I don't want to say some questions, right? It's we've seen it do well and we know that it
mhm.
can. Maybe a naval supply run for some pop off, or maybe there are some other ways to build frontline right now that might do a little better in this current meta. But hey, this is the first tournament after a big patch, right? So there's always going to be some wonk in that kind of a situation. So let's throw it over to Jking and Starry as they prepare for our next match.
Thank you. Yeah, it looks like Green Lemon did manage to get the win against Rook. And Man did. Is it Man? Is it M4N? Who knows? Did manage to win against Hanchan. And then we have Noan versus Dark as our second quarterfinal matchup.
Yeah, and that was we've seen a bunch of aggressive decks today from most of the players, and then Spoker was one of the standouts of just a very slow 3 control list lineup, and just taking the 2-0 over Head, and Head being a very excellent player, might suggest that maybe control is the direction to be headed in, just in the meta right now.
Yeah, it is possible. It looks like people today generally brought a less control-y list than last OCC. I don't know if you'd agree with that, but it seems to me like there's actually less control today than there was before, and yet we see control being really dominant. Um, it's tough to say exactly which decks won and which decks lost with the matchups that we didn't get to see, but I'd be really curious.
Yeah, and I'm especially surprised by the 2-0 loss from Tantron. I mean, 5-0 in qualifiers brought 3 very solid decks, and then just a quick 2-0. But I mean, that's just sometimes how it happens. So unfortunately, we won't be getting to see them, but we will be getting to see later the player that defeated them, M4N. So yeah, that's exciting. A lot of new faces in this tournament. But what are you expecting from the set we have sort of before us here with no one? Do you think no one's just simply going to take it based on name recognition, or?
I mean, I think that no one has a really solid lineup. I'm extremely partial to US Japan. I am not nearly as competitive as a player as you or most of the players in this tournament, but the last time I was in OCC quals, I played US Japan, and so it definitely has like a soft spot in my heart. Um, but yeah, I would like to see at least bare minimum US Japan do well, but who knows, it might get banned. So,
Yeah, and I mean, just looking at these players' lineups, it looks like they both have very similar decks. They both have Japan, German aggro. They both have German US mid range. Definitely some deck building differences in deck building there. But then it comes down to that third deck. They both have Britain, but no one has that. Britain, Japan air, and Dark has that Britain US ramp. So it might just come down to, is Control the better pick, or maybe
mhm.
Britain just gets banned in both cases, and they play two mirrors. But with no one running a bit more on the heavy end with the Leopold with the Alpenfestung, whereas his opponent Dark doesn't. I mean, his top end is hipper and Panzer Grenadiers. Do you think that could be the difference? And not just is it the difference, but like, is it the difference? Which way is that the difference in? Because there's a world where no one just wins with more value off of these big cards, but there's also a world where no one has these big cards in his opening hand and can't really get them out.
Yeah, I don't know. It's tough to say. The one thing I will say though is that especially with Britain, I didn't think that Royal West Kent's was going to be that crazy, but that is definitely an oversight on my part. Definitely should have seen that one coming. Just the fact that it creates a win con out of things that previously weren't win cons, like stuff like Glamour Boys, allowing you to contest the front line with your guard units, which is like really bizarre. I mean, I'm glad that Britain is getting some proactive tools, but yeah, I think that depending on how early you can push your stuff into the front line, start contesting those early aggressive plays. Yeah, giving all your guard units blitz is pretty crazy. So,
All right, well, we've talked about the decks. Now we can pull them back up quickly.
mhm.
Just take another quick look at them. So no one here, as I mentioned previously, has Japan-German aggro, very, very fast-paced deck. A German-US mid-range deck. This one's a bit harder to place exactly on the map. It's got War Machine, Bomber, Mafia, Leopold, but it also has, of course, Jaeger regiments and just a lot of pressure 35Ts. Or 38Ts, sorry. And then in his third deck, it is the classic Britain-Japan air come back from the grave to haunt us here in OCC once more. We'll see how good it is with the inclusion of some of these newer cards.
Yep, and Dark has this Japan Germany Jagger list, this Germany US sort of mid-range list, and then a Britain US air list. So three pretty similar decks actually, but um, a little bit of spice. Oh, sorry, that isn't really an air list. It's more of a ramp list. So. All right, so it looks like Dark's ramp list is being banned, and then Noan's Germany is being banned. What do you think about this, Jking?
I think it makes complete sense that Dark's Britain deck gets banned. It's really the only control deck in
Mm-hmm.
the lineup, and no one's closest thing to control he has here is also getting banned. So it seems like the players don't really want these slower games. They don't really want to play against decks that have the potential of healing, have the potential of clearing voids. They just want a fast units versus fast units battle for the front line. And I mean, that's what they're going to get with the decks selected here. Air is sort of the standout one that's going to be slightly different in terms of its playstyle. Obviously, Jaguar versus Jaguar, very straightforward in terms of its strategy against each other, and the German-US mid-range is going to be slightly slower, just trying to take advantage of larger units. Air is going to be the one deck that plays very differently, and it's going to be the deciding factor on who wins this match. Is Brit Air good enough in the meta right now, and is Japan Ally the correct choice to go with that?
Yeah, I mean, we haven't seen Japan Ally since Empire Strikes. What, a year? Over a year now? Since we've seen a Britain-Japan
Yeah, I
air
mean,
list.
there was some like death throws during Brothers in Arms, but since then, like with Aichi getting rotated, there was just no
Yeah.
point in playing Japan Ally. But now with the inclusion of Commit the Reserves, and Winter Regiment, and the I'm blanking on the name of the one cost.
Shibata?
Yeah, of course the new Shibata and
Oh, Type 94 TK?
Out the Mist. Out the Mist.
Oh,
that
Out
is
of the Mist.
better.
Yeah, no, Out of the Mist is a good card. Yeah, we're playing charades here.
And we see the no one doing a mulligan, going first. Has a decent hand here, bit of card drop, some things to play on turn one. Dark, on the other hand, has a great opening hand, but he has to be a little scared of just slapping this 164th because of these Out of the Mist from no one's deck. If he plays 164th on one, this World Rage just gets blown out.
Yeah, obviously in any sort of aggro v aggro, aggro v midrange, midrange v midrange matchup, being able to get early bombers down is really, really nice for Brit Air. It makes the pack 40 not look super great, specifically the second copy, right? I mean, one copy, okay, we'll just destroy it with the pack 40. But that second copy makes it potentially an issue for pack 40, especially with like a close air support coming down. So we'll see how this turns out for Dark. The good news for Dark is although they have a challenge in front of them with these swordfish, they did get that turn 2 War Machine, so maybe they can get some tempo going there with that credit lead.
This is a very fun position that often comes up in air matches versus these sort of mid-range decks, where if from no one's perspective, he's thinking, oh man, this is really annoying, I don't have any buff cards. And from Dark's perspective, you're thinking, oh man, it's really annoying that my opponent hasn't buffed anything yet, because you have all of this removal. You could remove a 2/4 Swordfish, you could remove a 2/5 Swordfish with Sea Embargo. You don't really want to have to play your removal on non-buffed units, because that means that your opponent's going to get more value out of their buffs. So he goes for the 35T through the breach to take out one of the Swordfish. Kitty Hawk gonna come down, clear out the board. And again, Dark can remove one of these things with the pack 40. He can also play down the autocannon and pray that a fighter has to trade into it. But his hand went from looking very, very good to it's looking less good each passing turn here.
Yeah. The pack 40, I definitely kind of glanced over that one when they rebalanced it, changed it, whatever you want to call it, and that is a huge top deck for no one.
Yeah, the close air support will let Kitty Hawk go into the autocannon, and the other two units can go face, or even another Swordfish could come out. There was even a possibility for no one to play Swordfish first, and he misses out on 2 damage face this turn, but it does grant him another 2/4 bomber on the board, and we will almost certainly see this first 2/4 bomber being removed from pack 40. So no one is seemingly valuing the tempo, and actually values the health on Kitty Hawk more, goes face for 3.
Very interesting indeed. Yeah, Dark has these cards that are all very conditional. Like Through the Breach is conditional on being in the support line. Pack is conditional on them being a tank. I mean, in order to obtain its full value, suppression requires that you have an air unit. It feels like there's just a lot of conditionals in Dark's deck, and unless you sort of have either the air units that you need or the matchup that you need, this is a pretty tough
Yeah,
spot to get out of.
there's some cards in his deck that could just work perfectly fine without many cards in hand. He could chain 38Ts back to back. He could top deck a Blitz Doctrine to develop 2 tanks and buff up the future units he draws. But there's also some very dead draws in his deck. Like there's another copy of Suppression, there's 2 for Freedom,
Mhm.
there's the 99th Infantry Battalions. All of these will do absolutely nothing because this Pack 40 is certainly leaving the board. So he has maybe 1 or 2 turns to top deck some form of card draw that can chain into additional card draw or card generation through Blitz Doctrine, but if he draws a couple dead cards, it's over. But 38T is a great draw, and the
Okay.
38T!
Okay, let's go. Oh my gosh, that's crazy. Yeah, I was gonna say, I mean, the problem that you can run into when you're playing ramp cards is that you just hit a bunch of duds, especially when you're playing ramp cards and then all these conditional cards that sometimes are dead. Like, this deck is greedy, but I mean, if you're gonna have no-win luck when playing against no-win, then I mean, yeah, maybe it's worth it.
Yeah,
Maybe that's the way to go.
we saw Noah running 1 copy of Enigma, most likely for situations exactly like the one Dark is in now. Dark's saying, I don't need Enigma. I just have enough cards to say draw on them that I am fine just not having cards in my hand if all of the cards on my deck say draw on them. But no one's putting on the pressure, and even if Dark continues to get a good series of draws, and that's not really one of them, you can't draw with the Jaeger, there's nothing to draw with the Suppression yet.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, Dark really just needs a couple key pieces. Um, but it's gonna be tough, especially when no one has that Sincerely Yours in hand. Um, it looks like, you know, Dark is almost able to recoup the card advantage if some things go right for them. But no one having that Sincerely Yours means that the moment that they get a break, suddenly their hand is gonna be full again. So
And this turn highlights sort of one of the strengths, one of the many, many strengths of Air, is if this was a Jaegro deck or a frontline deck that was in this position against a Dark, the Devil's Brigade and the Jaeger Regiment would be amazing cards to just trade out the front line, stop your opponent from being able to put you under pressure, and continue to draw you cards. But Air just sits back in the support line and will just farm these infantry for days because they can't really do anything. They can only push up into the front line, and another suppression draw is completely dead. It will actually kill him if he plays it.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, unfortunately, this looks like it is. Unfortunately, Dark, despite having that really nice 38T, 38T chain, there's just too many conditionals. The Jaeger's conditional, the Suppression's conditional, and when the conditions aren't met, your cards are looking really, really subpar. So,
And this does actually make me wonder why these types of German mid-range decks stopped running FW. Because back in the day, we saw FW in every single German deck with War Machine, as a 3 of, sometimes as a 4 of, and that's a 6 cost 5/5 fighter. It blocks these bombers, it's an extra body, it's an extra card draw, and it will activate these new suppressions that people are fitting into
yeah,
this deck.
it's
But
funny that you said that because after seeing the Suppressions and the War Machines and just seeing kind of how Dark's deck is going, I almost said, why is Dark not playing FWs, especially like over something like 99th? I mean, 99th is there's probably going to be very few matchups where you even have the opportunity to get that buff off.
and
I feel like FW would be great for this deck.
Yeah, but I guess there's just not enough air in the meta that you feel the need to block these cheap bombers, and against the slower decks that aren't going to be fighting in the front line, like ramp decks. I guess 99th offers a bit more early game aggression to get some damage in before these big bombers start coming down, before the bomber mafias, etc. But Dark is just going to choose Death by Shibata, and no one with a very convincing win on that Britain deck is now just has 2 opportunities to win with Jagra.
And I mean, Jagro is consistent. Jagro, if nothing else, is consistent. It'd be unlikely, or I don't want to say that. It would not be guaranteed to win any particular match of Jagro, but it's almost impossible to lose 2 in a row on Jagro, especially versus similar decks.
And we will be headed straight back in, and Dark, very quick 4-card keep, and those are some 4 amazing cards against Jagro.
Yeah, I mean, if you can call their early aggression, especially going second, where you're just left with two extra cards in hand, then Yeah, it looks really nice. I mean, no one is gonna get to get this expansion off if desired, but if so, then Dark can easily just play either Jaeger 164th or Jaeger trade.
I really like this heads-up play by Noen. He's looking at his hand, and yes, you can just play Yokosuka expansion, and I think that's what the vast majority of players would do in this situation, is just get the expansion off when you can, push up another blitz unit. He's saying, I know you want to be playing War Machines, and also, I know that I'm certainly going to be able to take the front line next turn, regardless of what you do. So, like, even
Yeah.
if you push a 1-3 into the front line, Yokosuka comes down between the Shibatas, trades out the 1-3, Shibata goes to the front line and draws with expansion.
Yeah, that's an excellent play by Noen. It requires a lot of foresight. It requires knowing exactly what's in your opponent's deck. It plays around Jaeger. It plays around War Machine. It plays around Through the Breach. Really, really good play from Noen there. And
And
as you said, I don't think many players would have seen that.
Noen here really valuing these Shibatas, and that might seem like a bit of a confusing play, but if you look at Dark's hand, it gets much less confusing very quickly, because Dark's hand is entirely orders, and 2 of those orders generate additional orders, and the only unit he has gives him an order. And anytime he plays an order right now, it will be taking 4 damage, and with a sheeted pickup from Noen, that's not going to be important right away. But if enough of these damage comes through off of the Shibatas, that is going to put Dark in a very rough spot, because Dark does not run any healing in his deck. He does not run the Alpenfestung that we see in Noen's version of German US.
Yep, and we see Noen sacrificing one of those 8 pieces, saying that they value 3 cards significantly more. And honestly, it's hard to disagree. I mean, although it would be really, really nice to keep these Through the Breaches, War Machines, Blitzed Auctions offline. I mean, 3 cards is 3 cards, right? Surely? So anyways,
We've
Dark
seen.
really thinking about this play.
Yeah, I think he was deciding between what 2 things he wanted to do between Through the Breach, push up Red Devils, and play War Machine. And it looks like he's going to decide to play War Machine Through the Breach. If your opponent did not have a Shibata, you would make this play almost instantaneously. It's the fact that this play also means you're taking 4 damage to the HQ in a deck without healing against Jagro that makes him have to think so much about this. In the end, I do really like this play. You're allowing your opponent to take back the front line, but you've seen 22nd, you've seen expansion, or 2 expansions maybe, at this point, and you're saying, I want the War Machine, I want this Panzer Grenadiers to come online. Your Shabbat is annoying, but I would rather get out my big units to start just snowballing in the front line. And I will use my health as a resource in a similar way that we've seen in other decks like self-damage. But in this case, it's not you damaging it, it's the Shibata damaging it.
Yeah.
And we've seen a lot of Shibata on ladder, and we've seen a lot of Shibata today here since it was reworked and released. And there's been a lot of discussion about this card. I know a lot of people really do not like this card because it can be quite frustrating to play against. But I think Dark is showcasing where Shibata is a good card, but it's not something you should be too afraid of. It's not something that should make you not play orders in your
I
hand,
agree.
period. And no one on the same side is showing, like, there's situations where you can hold back Shibata to threaten damage to your opponent, and there's situations where you just throw Shibata forward
Mm-hmm.
and say, you know what, it's a 1-3 unit, deal with it. I don't care if you kill it, and then play orders and miss out on damage. I'm not going to sacrifice the tempo of just not pushing units to the front line and wasting credits.
Yeah, haters can be mad. I love Shivata. Shivata has single-handedly made me enjoy this game. I went from a period of not really enjoying the game to a period of loving the game, and Shivata really did it for me. Having a tool to punish all of the greed that, in my opinion, had been sort of getting out of hand. I think that Shibata was a great choice because it gives a tool to combat some of the greedier decks without actually preventing people from playing the greedier decks. So it's kind of like the best of both worlds, where you're not actually nerfing those decks directly, but you're giving players an opportunity to fight back against them. So yeah, I really really enjoy Shibata, and I think its inclusion, its rework has very much improved the state of cards. I'm really excited about it.
You see Noen picking up the Signal Regiment, and he's going to be able to get the shoots in value. Dark is racking up these units in the support line, but it's this position that always feels awful against Jaggro because you're just saying, if my opponent has Desperate Measures, the game is over. Like, I just immediately lose if Desperate Measures hits the board. And now, unfortunately, no one doesn't have it in hand, but he is going to be able to start or continue pushing this damage into the HQ of Dark. And Dark has some high value cards in his hand. He has some tempo cards in his hand. But if we look at Noen's hand, so does Noen, and Noen also has Shiden and he has Signal Regiment, so this damage to the HQ is going to be on Noen's side, and it is looking like he is going to be able to end the game much faster than Dark can at the moment.
I
And he's really
agree,
forcing Dark to have an answer.
especially with all of the orders in Dark's hand and the Shiden looming large. Even if Dark is able to take out all of these units, it's going to be really, really difficult to do so without. I mean, you have to deal with the Shavada, you have to deal with the signal, and then even still, if you do that, then you're going to be certainly taking damage from uh, some of these other sources, whether it be the Schutzen or the Pack or the Type 94. And once you put all those together, that magic number of 8, it's really just a matter of time until no one is able to get that Shiden out.
I would have loved to have seen Dark essentially go for the exact same line, but rather than buff the Panzer Grenadiers in the front line, put the buff on the Pack 40, because it's not easy for Noen's Japan list to deal with a 4-4
Not at
ambush
all.
already in the support line. But I don't know if this was just sort of tunnel visioning on not giving him Schutzen value, tunnel visioning on buffing the thing in the front line, or it it's you don't want to say it, but it could just be a case of not realizing 99th can buff things in the support line, because you need a unit in the front line, so it's very easy to think that the card only buffs things in the front line, and that's the correct choice 99% of the time.
Yeah,
But it's
it's
very easy to miss that. But the desperate pickup from Noen, and that's just, I mean, the game's not over this turn, but that is essentially GG. He clears Dark's entire board, drops him to 8, and the Shibata stays on board, and Dark's entire hand is orders.
yeah, this is basically impossible to get out of for Dark, because the only way that you could even contest any of this is by playing a Blitz Doctrine, maybe hoping to get a 35T or something like that. But then if you want to kill the Pack, then you'd have to 4 freedom, and then you're taking it. The way that it works out, it's just not going to be realistic for Dark to get back into this.
And what we might be seeing here is just a case of, in the Conquest format, you have to win with all of the decks your opponent doesn't ban. So one weak deck can pull down what is otherwise a very solid lineup, very solid decks.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I mean, we kind of saw that with Head, where Head struggled to get a win with that US Japan. Corn and Thanatron, who practiced the matchup, felt that that deck was just not able to win into Spoko's lineup. And here, Dark had what I mean, we thought were good hands in games 1 and 2, and the deck has just fallen short to regular hands from meta decks coming out from Noen. It's not like Noen has had crazy, explosive, high roll starts by any means. This might just be simply Dark's deck falling a little bit short compared to the most efficient decks in the meta right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the core idea behind Dark's deck really works, but honestly, I would like to see some of these conditional cards replaced with things that are more generally good, and then kind of being supported by a couple of tech cards. It seems like almost everything is a tech card, and while in certain scenarios that can be crazy, in other scenarios it can be really unfortunate. So I like the core idea of Dark's deck. I think it's a really fun deck. I think it has the potential to be a really strong deck, but I think that it does need a little bit more refining and a little bit more testing.
Yeah, and I think it's also a perfect example of when things might work on ladder, but not necessarily work in tournament. Because when you're playing against the best of the best with the refined decks, and they know how to play into your list. It's an open list too, so they see all of these cards. Where a 99th might catch somebody by surprise in a ladder game. In a tournament where it's open deck lists, they're going to see that, they're going to play around it, and decks like these just fall a little bit short when they're not refined perfectly. But Dark is going to have the opportunity to come back in the next season and potentially refine this list or bring different lists. And I'm sure the experience he has earned here today, as well as in qualifiers, will help him go much further in KARDS esports.
Yeah, I think that Dark is an excellent player to have gotten this far, and I'm confident that after more experience in the competitive scene, that we're going to be seeing a lot more of him. So
Yeah,
yeah, very excited to see him back.
there was no real major faults in how
Hmm.
they played the game. It was just simply maybe their deck wasn't the best deck.
Hmm.
And that's such something you're going to learn with experience. But I think the play they showed on their list, the fact that they were able to stick in it this long, make it to top 8 through qualifiers as well, it really shows their determination.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Thank you so much. I think we're going to swap over to our other lovely co-casters for the first semifinals matchup. So we are going to first showcase Spoker versus Green Lemon after we come back with our other co-casters.
All right, so Spoker and Green Lemon in our first semi, and No N5 versus M4N in our second semi. We're about to see No versus Green, or no, I'm sorry, Spoker versus Green Lemon. What are you thinking about this matchup, Corn?
Um, I have Spoker. Unfortunately, we're not seeing Rook's list, the U.S. German list. I'm gonna have to, play that on my own to see it. But uh, it's gonna be a battle of aggro versus control. It's gonna be a true litmus test for the meta. Um, just looking at the decks, you have to imagine the Brit is going to get banned from Spoker again. Going to be a solid choice to ban. And, you know, we'll have to see what deck Green Lemon has banned out from him. Let's get some good choices. Probably not frontline.
Yeah,
Maybe
your
ramp.
your your comment about it being a litmus test, I think, is pretty on point. Definitely going to be very interesting for sort of what follows after this for the game at large. Our players are working on their bans.
Yeah. So just I predicted Spoker and Green Lemon to advance. However, I was 0 for 2 on the lower end of the bracket. I had Dark and Tanshan winning, so 50% right for me, not the best. And I was really high on Dark's matchups. I thought perhaps No One Five's air list would flood him with orders. Um, Not the case today. Really good job by No and Five. Shibata coming in clutch, punishing. So unfortunately for
Well,
me, I had Dark winning. I'm already out of
winning it
my
all.
predicted champion. Not going home with the prediction trophy today. So unfortunate for me.
Mm, all right, let's take a look at the deck lists. All right, you
Uh,
want to take me through Green Lemon's decks real fast?
we
Or
are looking at a U.S. German frontline, relatively standard. We got a pack 40 in there for the good times. We got some Panzer Grenadiers for extra blitz units in the late game. Um, pretty standard list. This list should be solid into the ramp control-ish lists, um, especially if the Brit list is banned. Looking at the Brit ramp list, interesting. We are looking at a mid-range, mid-range ish. We're looking at legions and we're looking at ramp. So it's not the litmus test that I was thinking of Jagro frontline, some aggro lists. Um, this is an interesting choice if you are Spoker to ban. Probably you're going to ban the ramp list. Bringing your control list. You don't want someone to go over you. You want them to go through you. So that would be my choice for Spoker to ban this Brit list. And then, going to the Legions list, we're seeing a lot of Intel tech to generate value on your Legions. Stretch the Line is the hero of Legions lists these days. You're getting a 3/3 Legion, and some Intel that can really synergize with the Tarnal regiment. And when you play Japan Legions, there's always, at least for me, there's always a question of, do you you have the Legions cards and tech cards, but then with your other Japan slots, do you try to fill in like an aggro slide where you put in a bunch of early units to try to get some damage in before you stabilize the board with legions, or do you go for more control and top end? I like the more control side. A lot of people like the throwing in all of the Jagro one drops, and then putting in the legions package, and that's what Green Lemon is doing today.
All right. And now we can take a quick look at Spoker's lists. We see a pretty similar Brit US ramp to start it off. Both players, making use of a lot of the same cards here, all the way down to the ASW patrols. But Spoker with some interesting splashes here. The secret ops is definitely something a player has to constantly think about, as well as Ultra, right? So there's two different countermeasures, and he could obviously float 3 and could have secret ops up, or Ultra. It's kind of interesting to try to hide it in there when you have other countermeasures as well. Every time you float, they kind of have to think, beyond just, is it enough for their one and only, or is it not? Because obviously that's a pretty easy decision. And then, of course, seeing some things come back like West Kent's and Cromwell. We've seen those across the tournament in some other decks as well. And that's really fun and interesting as well. We've talked about the Cromwell being a, just big old guard, but then also the Royal West Kents are super interesting as well, and their ability to use that pincer effect to make sure that you damage. You can put them in the back line, put the pincer on a unit in the front line, and then they have to essentially kill that unit in the back line first, whether it's through the other one or not. And then moving on, we have a US Brit. Uh, All right, we are back. We are actually going to do a quick change in the semifinal that we are featuring. We are actually going to feature No and 5 versus M4N. So let's take a look at those deck lists real quick. Corn, can you take me through No and 5's decks?
No and 5 is bringing the heat. We got Jagro going fast. 1 pack 40 is a blast. We got this German US mid range trying to get some tempo and then convert. We got Reichsbank for fun as well. And then we got the Brit Japan Air with Shibata package. Shibata Bing, Shibata Bang. Let's go check out the other lists.
All right, and M4N's list. We start out with a US frontline, one of the only kind of bog standard decks that we've seen all day, going with the typical German package, Blitzkrieg, Panzergren, Schützen. Then we move on to Japan Legions with an Uprising, which is interesting. Uprising sort of has fallen out of that deck, but M4N bringing one for that massive AoE blast. And then lastly, we have a ramp deck with a US ally taking the 2 Bomber Mafia, quite a bit of planes. Actually, it is an air deck. I apologize, not a ramp deck. I keep doing that. But sincerely yours, the Sea Patrols, Spitfires, plenty of airplanes, both of our Swordfish and Gladiators, clearly an air deck. So we'll see how that one stacks up as well. And the bans are in. No and 5 banning that very air deck, and M4N banning No's German deck. Do you think those are good calls, Corn?
No's pretty good on that German US list. It's eaten 2 bans so far, so I guess his competitors don't want to see it. And banning the air list from Man, it's a solid list. It can high roll, it can low roll, but it is very high ceiling. It makes some sense to see it banned. However, no one's air list gets through. It's got its work cut out against legions. Actually, versus legions, it should be pretty good if it can get the bombers out early. What would you say?
Yeah, that'll be the interesting matchup, right? Certainly, we've seen like air into frontline 1,000 times, and I feel like most of our viewers probably know how that goes. And then the Japan decks being so different, it will be really interesting to see. And I wouldn't be surprised if that is sort of our first matchup as well, knowing kind of uh, wanting to get off to a quick start and maybe M4N maybe anticipating that and kind of trying to pick something with uh, a big presence with guards to maybe stop the fighters. But I would say that both of his decks are going to probably have problems with those bombers.
So M4N's perspective, you're bringing legions, you're bringing Japan legions. What you don't want to see is someone bringing a lot of ramp to go over your legions. You want to be seeing no one's lineup with a lot of aggro and just say, hey, have fun going through my legions. So that makes a lot of sense why you would ban the German list that can go over it. Um, so the Japan matchup of Jagro versus Legions is going to be the linchpin. Can Jagro go fast and go early through Legions? Can it get the Shibatas down and punish you for playing so many orders? Or can Japan Legions just establish a board that is unbreakable for Jagro? I think that will be the crux of this matchup.
Yeah, certainly very contentious and anticipated here. Our first semifinal. Um Both of these, or I'm sorry, also a big experience, factor here as well, right? M4N's first tournament or first OCC, I believe, making it through the quals, making it through the first round, and then as soon as you make it through all of that, you play a guy like No. No and 5, of course, having probably more tournament experience than anybody but our very own Jking today. I would probably say no, probably, yeah, as the second most experience out of anybody. So, what do you think about M4N going up against that kind of uh, longevity?
I mean, the decks that are being played aren't necessarily complicated enough to where tournament experience would be a massive factor. It's certainly going to be a factor. No one, has a proven track record. M4N is a little bit less certain. Does he just have ice in his veins? Can he just sit and calmly calculate and just not make mistakes? We'll have to see. It it is what it is. They're here for a reason. I'm not going to, say M4N can't, outperform because of that. And sometimes the fact that you're playing such a well-known name on the biggest stage is going to give him the motivation to just grind and just super focus. Whereas maybe no one, he's been here, he could slip up. Probably not the case, but if you're a new player and you're facing no one five, you're going to be staring, you're going to be focused. So, I yeah,
We've certainly seen some players make some really excellent first appearances, right? Like we've seen some players have some really great first tournament showings. So it's definitely not I would say like completely out of the ordinary or anything like that. But yeah, of course, you would say that the player advantage probably goes to no against most of our players. It's nothing against M4N, right? That's probably just about almost anyone. The advantage goes to no, just in terms of games played, tournament games played, set games played, and then even just ladder games played, right? I mean, he's just been around for so long, putting so much time in. So it'll be certainly interesting to see. And then Spoker on the other side of the bracket now at this point, kind of feels almost like that new style of like a no-in, right? Like now we see Spoker kind of dedicating that same amount of time to the game in that same vein, just starting obviously months and months after no-in did.
yeah. So, on another competitive note, today, first day of World Championship qualifications.
That's true.
Anyone in the chat went 9-0. Please DM me your deck list.
That's true. Throw up those scores in chat. Let us see them.
Throw up your scores in chat. No shame.
Yeah, no shame on the chat
No
scores.
shame.
This is on such a delay. We can't rip on you. Don't worry. Yeah, we're all right. You're gonna.
Yeah.
We'll be in the future by the time those chat scores are actually there. So let's put them up. I know some people that have already done pretty well. I know some people that have not done so well. But hey, the year that I was able to make it to the top four, I believe I had a 2-7 day. Obviously, that didn't get used. Sometimes it just happens. Sometimes you have a 2-7 day.
Looks like there are 9 players with a perfect day so far. So shout out to those 9 so far.
Yeah,
Still have
that
some
9 and
time.
0 feels good. Feels safe. You know that you couldn't have done any better. You know that baby's getting used out of your 3. The 9
I'm
and 0
gonna
feels nice.
gonna name drop some 8-1 chaotic poison.
Oh,
Introduction.
there's a team heavy guy. Introduction always great to see. Always out there. You'll never find a YouTube video free of a cards YouTube video free of a nice introduction comment.
True. Stand up guy. Man. I'm 2 and
And
0.
chaotic poison, as Starry astutely pointing out, repping the U.S. We don't have that much. We don't have that much rep these days. There's only like 4 of us, 5 of us. If Vinny is floating around, shout outs to Vinny if he's out there.
Shout out.
Although if Vinny is caring about cards today, I imagine he'd be on the grind in that World Qual session. So if you don't see him on top of that leaderboard, maybe not.
I'm 2-0 playing when the other casters are casting. Unfortunately, their matches went too fast for me to get that 9-0 real fast.
Fastest 9-0 in the West, baby.
um
Yeah,
so
the
yeah,
World Championship always a great time for everybody involved. The in-client system is really nice. It's always fun to see that kind of in-game tournament style, and now we just got that added. The latest patch, of course, giving us the Blitz tournaments as well. So shout out 1939 for that. Those are very cool, very fun. I've already seen some of our best players really dedicating a lot of time, already winning, 20 plus Blitz tournaments. So very cool. And a lot of just, seeing a lot of names the first day that it dropped, making sure they got like at least one. Like you could see, some just a recognizable name with like a one or a two, and it's just like, yeah, I know that player. I know that makes sense to me that they'd want to get at least one, get at least one or two tournament wins while they're available. So all that incline stuff is really cool to see.
shout out Fiery Ambush, the free card in the store. Go claim it today.
True, go get your fire ambush. You need it.
It's very fiery.
Our more deductive viewers may be noticing that we had a little bit of a stall game going on there for a second with some technical difficulties, but we are back getting into our semifinal here between No and M4N.
Ooh, no one pulling an Out of the Mist, an air sup. Got the early removal. Gonna send the air sup back. Out of the Mist is what you are hoping to see, and it is seen.
Yeah, and as M4N reaches for that trusty TK early start, it's gonna go right back the other way. The one of the best things you can target with an Out of the Mist. You only need one, and it becomes yours, and it is the exact same card salvaged as it is. Not very lovely.
Yeah, that TK early looking like a turncoat, not a very patriotic driver is going to say, you know what? I feel like driving for you, Nolan.
Giving him the flip.
And that would be pretty devastating against Jagro. However, man is playing Legions, so that tank is going to have to drive into some Legions eventually.
Yeah, M4N. I also want to read it as man almost every time, as the old school 4 as an A. Good stuff. But
Shout out Leet Speak.
yeah, shout out Lead Speak. As he does draw into this, the raiding brigade could be really useful for Shibata, allowing him to play all these orders that kind of Legions revolves around. Even spawning the Legions is order based, so those Shibatas are going to be a big deal. But you also think on the flip side of that, right? The normal play that you would make, in a pre-Shibata world, you'd be holding on to that raiding brigade as a way to kill a bomber or a fighter. Those 1/3s come out, or even something like a shark, any albacores. All of these planes are able to be dealt with before the buff by that raiding brigade, and it certainly feels good to get an air dex plane off the board.
This is looking pretty good for No and 5. M4N can definitely stabilize here if we can get a massive uprising. It is we're gonna have to start the uprising counter right now. It is dealing 0 damage, but there's 2 Polish units on board that could put that up to a 5k for 2.
And Shibata really coming into play here as well. Normally if an air deck isn't getting a single air unit out until turn 4, they're not really having that great of a time. That's probably not the start they want. They're probably not really not like out of the game by any means, but it's not optimal. But Shibata allowing the air player to sort of take some time against a more control heavy deck and still burn off some damage. And air is a deck that moves very powerfully, very fast. So, couple only takes a couple Shibata pings to make you suddenly in reach of these big air boards. The buff really coming in handy, getting it right up to 2 damage to make some really nice trades.
M4N, he's fighting back. Although this doesn't look like it is, starting well for him, we have to remind you that the matchup that this series hinges on will be the Japan versus Japan matchup. This was an expected victory for Noen.
And just completely changed around, right? Like
Mm,
that's a half of M4N's health basically down to a single Shibata, a single card that was drawn, or the single one drop rather.
yeah, and an interesting note: Uprising will deal damage to the board for all legions, not just your own, that have been dispatched. However, no one has one out of the misted legions, but it is not Polish. It is Japanese. So that will not count towards the uprising.
That Shibata getting even bigger. I'm just not quite sure how M4N can draw himself back into this game.
The answer is he can't. The encyclopedia would say scoop, go next. That's what we're going to be seeing here pretty soon, if not an outright victory for Noen.
Yep, now we're just going to see a victory here. 10 big damage, then 1 albacore swing. And we are through a turn, I believe, 6 victory for Noen 5 on his air deck. Very quick, and that is exactly what can happen when a slow deck loses half of its health to just playing its own cards. You draw too many orders, you don't draw the units, you have to play the orders, you can't do nothing. And then you play the orders, you lose half your health, and suddenly an air deck's only against someone with 10. Air deck's going to take that out every time. So a very quick dispatching by Noen 5.
And even if Shibata didn't do damage, no one wouldn't have been able to convert there. M4N saying, I want the Japan matchup. I'm going to play Japan in case you go Japan first, and no one out predicts him by going Brit Air first.
And M4N right on your wavelength, Corn, understanding sort of the way these decks seem to match up into each other and double playing the Japan Legions, making sure he gets his Japan matchup.
Yeah, M4N going second shouldn't be a big deal against Jagra with this, good anti aggro tools at his disposal in the early portion of this game. A
And
little
on
bit,
the Ascent could be huge with all these 1 damage 1 drops lurking around. We'll see if he chooses to not. Yeah, he chooses not to play his signal there. And
very
I would
astute.
think that that signal not being played is because he is making sure that his on the ascent can not only be early, but will be as devastating as possible.
Yeah, no shame in ripping it here and saying, "Give me your units," and denying 2 draws off a 33rd Recon. There was the draw off the Jaeger Regiment, so we get 1 card for no one's efforts.
Boyd's Mill as well by 1. Slides in there. I'm not sure that it was the most correct play. He obviously lost his own Shibata to kill those 2 units as well. But I also am not quite sure what waiting on it would have achieved either. So certainly interesting, and we can see we're kind of in the same game here. Shibata's so good. It's in a lot of decks today. It's in a lot of places. If you run any kind of unit-based anything and you're thinking about taking Japan and you're worried about any kind of control or big deck, anything with orders, I mean, you'd be silly not to.
Yeah, and M4N sees the bombing raid with the intel and knows that his perceived safety from the guard is only that, a perception floating in the wind. It's about to get bombed. Be
When
gone.
Noen is ahead like this, he doesn't care about your Shibata at all. Willing to rip those orders, as Jking is fond of saying, using that health as a resource.
Yeah, and M4N is not finding the legions that he wants, and now that he has it, it's going to come at a cost. And you got to think back to that turn with the honorable, excuse me, the honorable death. He had the choice to destroy the signal or the Shibata, and he chose the signal, which only would have dealt 1 damage to him so far. And instead, he left the Shibata up, which has dealt at least 6 damage to him, and now it's stacking. I probably would have considered just taking out the Shibata when I had the chance.
Yeah, honestly, very great point.
And no one might be making a quick 2-0, off the back of some Shibatas punishing an order heavy Legions deck.
Yeah, at this point, Noen has more resources than he knows what to do with. Throws out double draw boys, collecting the double draw last turn while also having out the 2 Shibatas, saying any of your orders are going to cost you 4 health. Almost able. He's Jagro, but he can just sit back.
And
Imagine being able to sit back as the Jagro player.
if you get quiet and listen, you can hear a tree pipit in the background just yelling at Shibata.
Oh no.
Tree pipit certainly an outspoken
If the
critic
tree
of the
pipit
Shibata.
screams and no one's around to hear him, does he really make a sound?
These are the true questions.
Shinano,
Well,
nice. There's a lot of 1 damage units for Noen 5. So could really use that. Shinano could throw down some of M4N's 1 drops as well to make it do even more damage, but
it's
it's going to
gonna
do 4 damage in and of itself, so it would still basically kill him.
yeah, you'd have to trade one of the Shibatas with your.
Still thinking about it, which I appreciate.
Here we go.
It's a good way
Dopamine
to
for the
go out.
day. Dopamine for the
That is
day.
pretty. That looked nice.
Shannon, no luck for man today on Legions.
Yeah, of course, no guard now, so no one is able to come with his Shiden with a whole bunch of extra kill damage, but any blitzer would get it done. The TK early would have got it done at the top deck. And of course, the 35T, trusty as always. An honorable fight, says Noen, as he takes our first semifinal set 2-0, but a great showing by M4N in their first tournament.
Yeah, I mean, no one just played that really well. Got the cards, did the damage, got the wins, get out of there. See you later. I'll be in the finals. Great job by M4N taking getting to the semifinals. Just not the day.
Yeah, not a great day for legions in general, right? We've seen 2 players, I believe, with legion decks, and seems like it may be hard in this current meta, or at least in this current tournament meta, for legions decks to find those wins that they need. But we're only a day into it. There's a ton of time for that kind of thing to develop. So let's throw it over to our other casting team of Jking and Starry. Or we will do that in a couple moments. But let's continue to talk about that game that we just watched. When a player like Noen, a strong tournament player with all that experience, plays somebody quickly like that, the quick 2-0, do you think that there was an advantage to all of Noen's experience, or do you think it was just bad deck lineups and that anybody in M4N's situation having to play those exact matchups probably wouldn't have fared any better?
I think it comes back to the honorable death, choosing to, prioritize the signal over the Shibata. I think that was the crux of the decision, because he ate 10 damage off of that Shibata, half of his health. And, he could have eaten a lot of damage from the signal if the signal was still on the board during the Shinano turn. But I would have preferred to kill the Shibata on that turn. Maybe that played into it. Every time you see a signal against Jagro, you gotta say, "Oh boy, I need to kill this with my honorable death. This is, a good win." But maybe it's slow in that adjustment period to recognizing that's what he needed to do.
And here we go back to our bracket. We see Known 5 awaiting the winner of Spoker versus Green Lemon. And to kind of piggyback off what you said, Corn, also very interesting, right? The experience for sure helps. No one has experience in adjusting to a meta, experience in playing the first tournament out of a patch. Those things play, maybe directly to his favor. Because the thing is even if you have a ton of experience, you don't have a ton of experience playing against Shibata in that current format, right? Or current form, I'm sorry. That obviously, card has only been back since our recent patch about maybe 10 days ago. So it hasn't been in that form for that long. So that also, I feel, sort of weighs in. But I think you made a really interesting call. I probably would have killed the signal too, and I probably would have died the same way. So let's throw it back now, for real this time, to our other wonderful casting pair as they get you ready for our next match.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so that was really interesting to see. I really enjoyed seeing that Britain Japan Air is still viable, at least on a competitive scene. Who knows if it's ladder viable, but I thought that was really cool. What do you think about that match?
Yeah, I think sort of echoing what you just said. It feels like we're getting flashbacks to 2022, seeing Britain Japan Air, piloted by Noen, making it to the finals of an OCC. And yeah, Noen just showing like the why he has made it to. I think at this point it's like 30 plus OCCs. He's won several of them. He's looking to win another one today by making it to the finals. Just a very solid player. He understands these matchups perfectly, particularly. I mean, he's known for occasionally bringing like a wild, wacky, heavy control list, but he understands the ins and outs of these very aggressive tempo v tempo mirrors so well. He knows when to pressure face. He knows when to hold back. He knows when to flood the board. And I mean, yeah, just those years of experience playing. I mean, Jagro and Air in OCCs that I think was a help there in taking that victory.
Yeah, well, before we see who no one gets to face, we got to first figure out his challenger, and we're about to do that. We're going to see Green Lemon versus Spoker. So why don't we first take a look at Spoker?
Yeah. Well,
Oh,
we've
sorry. The players are actually ready, so we are going to go right into the bans, right into the action. Spoker and Green Lemon both getting Britain banned. Jking, what can you say about this?
I mean, there's the joke always ban Brit. I mean, when that came around, it was when Britain Air was the most dominant deck in the game. This is a very different Britain that's been banned in this case. Both players having their Britain USA ramp decks being banned. Um, and the decks that they have remaining are very different. For Green Lemon, it's US Frontline and Japan Poland Legions, so two more mid-range styles, where they are focused on taking the board, whereas Spoker has a US Britain ramp list and a German Britain discard control list. So much slower decks from Spoker, and I mean you can ban the Britain US ramp, but you can't ban the US Britain ramp as well. So a lot of the same cards being run in that, and I I have to say, based on deck lists, I think I'm honestly favoring Spoker in this matchup. Also, based on experience, Spoker has played in a few more tournaments, and he has placed higher in recent tournaments and on ladder. So I think that this is going to be the next step on our way to a Spoker Noen final showdown of the fast decks versus the slow decks in the finals. But Green Lemon can maybe upset that narrative here today by really showing what he can do with these decks, and we're headed into game one. It is going to be oh, that is Green Lemon on a Britain deck. So perhaps the bands were confused. Perhaps Green Lemon picked the wrong deck. We are coming back here, so most likely that he picked the wrong deck.
Oops.
I
But
mean,
yeah,
it
I will
happens.
say, I think that ramp, especially Green Lemon is bringing Legions, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
Yeah, I think Legions is really going to struggle into these ramp lists. Yeah, you do have a lot of incidental damage, especially if you're playing these Shibatas. But
I
now that the ramp lists have a lot more nice, chunky, like mid-rangey units, like these 4 and 5 drop guards, and you don't necessarily need to play all these orders to contest board. I don't know. It's gonna be hard. I think it's really gonna come down to the Shibatas, but I don't know about you.
I will say there are a few meaningful differences between this Japan Poland Legions and the Japan Poland Legions we saw on display from Man. Man was playing the much more traditional version of the deck that's a bit more slowing and trying to act almost like a control deck in certain ways with the uprisings
Mhm.
and a bit more removal.
Mhm.
The way Green Lemon has built his, he's running Type 93s in here. He can just have the explosive Jagro starts. He's
Yep.
also cut Uprising in favor of just more consistent unit generation with an extra Plan West compared to Man's deck. Um, so yeah, I think we might be able to see a bit more of an aggressive start from this deck. And with the Shibatas, it might be enough to get over the line with these fairly order-heavy decks coming here from Spoker, but we're
Yeah.
not going to be seeing that matchup in game one. Game one is going to be Discard versus Frontline.
Yeah, would you expect, or sorry, I guess what I want to say is, could you compare Japan Poland Legions to like a slightly faster version of the old US Poland Legions? Like this particular iteration of Japan Poland is like cutting the control stuff, gonna be more sort of just march your dudes forward.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I think there's a lot of comparison to be made there. The big difference is US Poland Legions of old did center around getting up these California regiments and then using all of the infantry summoned by all of these legions to play a very, very big unity of strength to just buff up a very large unkillable unit.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the Japan Poland is going to try to get that damage not through a big unit later in the game, but rather through a lot of small units early in the game and then curve into the Legion's units as more of their late game. Plus, of course, Dragon Slayer coming in. No Shiden though, which, I mean, not having Shiden's not the end of the world with the amount of guards a Spoker is running in his lists. It's unlikely that there would ever be many opportunities to go for an 11 damage or an 11 cost 8 damage Shiden. But in the game in front of us, though, I mean, Spoker's looking like he has a good hand, and I mean, the way Spoker has built his decks, I really appreciate the amount of anti-aggro he has put in his lists. I think a lot of people, when they build control lists, they get too caught up in trying to think about, their curve, especially if they're running stuff like ramp, putting in a lot of big units, thinking about how they win games against the
Yeah.
heaviest decks in the meta. Spoker just saying, you know what, I want all of the answers for things played from turns 1 to 4. because that's going to be when the game is decided in most matchups that I'm going to be seeing here today, and that is certainly going to be true against Frontline. If he gets blown off the board in the first 4 turns against Frontline, that's very difficult to come back from that point. But these Jaeger regiments, the Devil's Brigade, the Pack 40, these are all going to help fight for board.
Yep. I do agree. I think that control decks in particular, people when they're playing them want to put in as much greedy stuff as you can. And I don't know, I remember a long time ago people were cutting like bloody sickles from Soviet control, and I don't know. I think that in general, if you can get through the early game, then oftentimes just using removal on the things that need to be removed and thinking about what your threats are, you can get very far with very few quote unquote win conditions with control. And some people make really, really heavy control lists, but I prefer more anti-aggro lists for sure.
And it looks like Spoker might have disconnected. We saw him thinking a long time, or at least what it looked like he was thinking a long time on that turn 3, but he passed back the turn without playing anything. And Lemon is, of course, just playing to his outs. If your opponent disconnects in a tournament, you know what? You kill your opponent as fast as possible and then sort out what happens next. It's an unfortunate it's quite unfortunate for Spoko because this hand was looking quite strong. He could have done the turn 3 Reichsbank into a Pack 40 Hipper on turn 4 to also get that credit denial as well as bounce 2 units off the board.
Yeah. That would have been really, really nice. I mean, Pack 40 on this scout car into the Hipper on really anything except the 99th. But I think Green Lemon is waiting potentially for Spoker to reconnect, which is honestly very polite, very sportsmanly. But if Spoker did disconnect, there's honestly not a lot that can be done about it.
Yep. The rules in place are once the mulligans are finished and the first turn happens, the game is live, and it looks like Spoker has reconnected now. So he will get his 5 credits. And Lemon passing back the turn does mean that this is honestly a great show of sportsmanship from Green Lemon, because if he had just gone all face there, taken his turn, spent his 5 credits on that previous turn, it would be essentially impossible for Spoker to come back from. But with the Jaeger and Pack 40 coming out, yes, Lemon's putting a lot of damage in, and he has the Hellcat follow-up, but...
Yeah, I mean, but everything's going to be traded out this turn. Like, effectively, too, with some really nice trades at that. The question is, after all these trades are said and done, will Spoker be able to contest the front line? And the answer is no, which means that this Hellcat... Ooh, okay,
he has to
though.
play around the careless talk, and does he remember? He
Oh
does
my
remember, he plays
gosh!
around it and takes the win anyway, so...
Look at that.
Green Lemon potentially giving his opponent a way back into this game because of the disconnect. And he is able to clutch it out anyways. I mean, maybe having double Hellcat in hand was part of what was going through his mind when he passed back that turn 5.
It's still, I mean,
but-
it's still an excellent show of sportsmanship. I wouldn't, let's put it this way, I don't expect that out of any player.
Oh, certainly not.
There's no expectation that you have to do that. But the fact that he did do that is very compassionate. Green Lemon definitely, I don't know him very well. I do know Spoker really well, but I have not talked with Green Lemon very much at all. But yeah, he definitely gained my respect with that move. That was...
And if you see your opponent roping down with lethal on board, pointing the unit back and forth from your face, normally you think that that's BM. In this case, I think Green Lemon was likely chatting behind the scenes, seeing if there was anything he could do to, just restart the match. But alas, he is going to attack face with that second Hellcat, end game 1. And I mean, take the 1-0 lead in the series. And that's a very crucial 1-0 lead in the series, because now he's going to have 2 attempts on Japan-Poland Legions, which is arguably the weaker of his 2 decks in this against this particular lineup. Japan-Poland Legions is particularly good at grinding out a lot of these more aggressive tempo decks with just constant waves of legions, but these constant waves of legions are substantially less effective against particularly ramp, just because the B24J, they'll suppress your legions and they're able to go face, ignoring the guard with all the big bombers, and you simply just get blown out. But legions into this German discard it might be the deciding matchup.
Yeah, I mean this iteration of Legions does have the ability to play like Jagro, as you said. So it's possible that you can get under and then maybe try and finish it off with Sheeden or Bombing Raid, some incidental damage here and there. But it's definitely tough, definitely very reliant on who goes first versus who goes second, very reliant on the opening hands of both players. I don't think that it's anywhere near over as far as the ramp list into the Legions list, but yeah, it'll provide a really interesting, very asymmetrical matchup. So
And yeah, it seems like there's just continuing discussions behind the scenes. But I mean, if you're Spoker, which deck do you think he brings in first? If I'm him, I want to bring in the ramp deck.
I
There's
agree.
there's no bonuses for losing 1-2 to 0-2. But you want to get back on the board. You're probably a little bit tilted after losing to a disconnect in what was looking like a good hand. So yeah, if I'm him, I want to get my confidence back, get a win under my belt, and then go into just the matchup, the last matchup, if you can win on that ramp deck, obviously.
I mean, can we really say that Spoker lost to a disconnect if basically what happened is turn 4 for both players was skipped, right? So Spoker, instead of starting the turn with 4 credits, started the turn with 5 credits, and then
I mean,
uh,
Spoko did lose that crucial turn 3, which would have been the Reichsbank turn. Um, so
fair
Spoker
enough,
lost
fair enough.
turn 3 and 4, whereas Green Lemon probably didn't necessarily know what was going on immediately, took his turn 3, and then roped out his turn 4. But we are going to be going into that US ramp into Legions as we predicted. And I mean, what do you think of this hand from Green Lemon? You're not seeing like the 15th Cavalries, the Type 94s, but you are seeing all intel and a Tardau, which is, I mean, what you want to see in certain matchups. The question is that what you want to see in this matchup?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to say. The recons, I kind of would throw the recons back, especially going second, just because it's really nice to basically be free draw with Tarnov later in the game. It's really nice to just like top deck it as you're doing your intel thing. Um, we'll see. The question is going to be, are these stretch the lines going to be aggressive enough to put adequate pressure on Spoker, especially going second? I mean, they're infantry without blitz, but that 15th cavalry is a huge draw.
That 15th Cavalry essentially equals 6 extra damage into Spoker because there's nothing in Spoker's deck. Well, actually, I said there's nothing in Spoker's deck. That is not entirely true. There's Albacores in Spoker's deck, and there's one in his hand that he's going to be looking to play next turn, unless he top decks maybe a War Machine.
Yeah, but the good news is that this at least forces Albacore so that if Spoker draws War Machine or something like that next turn, that is not an option. As well as
And
um
Spoker surrenders the match, and I'm at a bit of a loss for words. That was not his banned deck. Maybe Spoker's just conceding the series. Maybe something's come up. We will keep you updated as we
yeah,
find out.
we will
But
keep you updated indeed.
this is turning into quite the unusual set. Uh, oh, it
He
seems like he
disconnected
disconnected
again.
again.
Okay, that is really unfortunate. Did the mulligans go through? Is that,
I mean,
you told me yourself that that is the way that these tournaments work. You would know much, much better than me, given that you've played in so many
oh,
of them.
we are getting back into the game, same matchups. It did seem like Spoku didn't actually mulligan any of his
Yeah.
cards. It seems like the mulligan timed out for him, so that is likely the reason why we are getting back into this. Very different hands here. And Now Lemon crucially starting first with the turn 1 Shibata, and Spoker's hand is looking
Yep.
a lot worse.
Yep.
One, you just want to be going first, but two, you would rather have going first with Albacore in hand to answer the turn 1 cavalry regiment from your opponent's just much slower start. But here, you have to pass back turn 2 with Shibata on the board, which is going to be just pinging your face over and over and over when you try to play down some of these orders in your hand.
Spoker is considering going for depth charges, it looks like, but depth charges does eat 4 damage from Shibata. That could matter, it could not matter. It's really hard to say, but it would allow at least a Glamour Boys on turn 4. The problem with that is that if Green Lemon um has two instances of intel, then Lemon will be able to double trade with the Glamour Boys without losing a single unit. It'd be okay trading with like a 3/3 and a 4/4 Legion, but trading with a 4/4 and either a 4/4 or 4/5 or 5/5 Legion, that would be a huge issue. You want to at least get rid of one of those legions with that Glamour Boy.
So it's looking like Spoker wants to use his 3 credits. He doesn't want to just pass back the turn. And it looks like he's deciding between Hellcat and Devil's Brigade because he wants to just play Cromwell on 4, Glamour Boys on 5. He doesn't need the credit gain immediately. I would have actually would have liked to see just maybe playing the research for depth charges, but not actually playing the depth charges, just having that in your hand as standby for just a 0 credits, give your HQ smokescreen on a bit of a defensive turn, just because the Devil's Brigade or the Hellcat, if you are doing turn 4 Cromwell into turn 5 Glamour Boys, you're not attacking with the unit you're playing, which gives your opponent the opportunity to get a value trade off on it or use a piece of removal on it. And Spoker's actually deciding that, you know what, my opponent's board is largely infantry. I'm just going to take out the legions in the front line.
I really enjoy playing this Legion stack. The intel is a really, really fun mechanic that is more rewarding the more skilled you are, as you're better able to play around your opponent's things, better able to, I don't know, it just creates really interesting dynamics. The cards themselves oftentimes are slightly, and I mean ever so slightly weaker, but having the opportunity to basically know every card in your opponent's hand, giving you the opportunity to counterplay, makes up for it in really cool ways. So I just want to shout out Legions, you know? Legions is
This
really cool.
This is a very aggressive start from Lemon, and he hasn't even played the Type 93 yet in his hand. Smoker gonna take 6 damage from the Shibata. He gains Smokescreen for the turn, so he's not under pressure of dying, but he's going to need to find something on the following turn, and his deck doesn't run Carpet Bomb-ins. He's still 2 turns off of a potential Bomber Mafia, and it's gonna give Green Lemon the opportunity to just slam down a Dragon Slayer.
It looks like Green Lemon is gonna do Dragon Slayer stretch the line, because if we were gonna see the intel draw card come out, the section 2 or whatever it's called,
Yeah.
then we would probably see that first.
And from Green Lemon's side, I kind of would have, on his previous turn, on his turn 5, when he played the Section 2, I would have rather seen the stretch the line just to get another unit on board. Your opponent's not playing any of these big AoEs, so going wide is a valuable strategy. And I think it would have been a very good idea to push the cavalry regiment between the legions. He is pushing Shibata to the outside, so you can't suppress both legions and Shibata. But if he had put the units on the inside, then he could have had 2 legions that can't both be suppressed by the same B-24J. So maybe some potential questionable lines coming out from Lemon, but it's not going to matter a ton because this might actually just be lethal on board with the Type 93.
It really looks like it,
ton of
specifically
damage
with
coming
the
through, and
Shinano.
that is it.
Yeah.
That's just going to be game. A quick 2-0 from Lemon. A bit of a confusing and somewhat unexpected 2-0, but I mean, that's kind of just unfortunate for Spoker. You know, we said that the set might represent, you know, what's better between these tempo-based decks and these control decks. I'm not sure if we can take this result to be that meaningful, just due to all of the unfortunate circumstances surrounding this match. But I mean, at the very least, that Legion's deck looked incredibly powerful. We thought that it could potentially be very weak into the ramp deck, but the ramp deck you miss War Machine, and suddenly your deck is looking a whole lot worse. It looks just like very bad, greedy control deck if you miss War Machine. And you have 4 copies in your deck, you try to hard mulligan for it, but I mean, sometimes you're just not going to draw it. That's the reality of a card game. And that's the risk you take building these types of decks that don't run a lot of 2-cost cards other than your credit gain.
Yeah, to be honest, I'm really, really surprised how quickly the legions were able to get online into the front line and big. I don't know, it always feels kind of slow, but specifically with stretch the line, it gives more aggressive opportunities for building and buffing legion armies. So, yeah, I was very surprised that by like turn 5, that these huge legion armies were just hitting for 4 or 5 a turn. But anyways, congratulations to Green Lemon. We will be seeing him again in the finals momentarily. But do you have any closing thoughts before we throw it back to our other co-casters?
I mean, I'm excited. I'm very excited to watch this finals. It will be casted by Corn and Thanatron, but I will definitely be still here watching the games because, I mean, Green Lemon versus Noen, they have some very interesting decks. They have some different decks, but still very quick, tempo-oriented. So I'm going to be very excited to see who comes out on top of that. And this has just been a blast of a tournament to watch. I mean, we've seen um, a bunch of different decks being brought in recent tournaments, but this one I think we starting to get into a bit more of a settled meta. We see a lot of similar decks brought across the players, and the big question seems to be this control versus tempo divide, with the ramp decks being brought into a much more sensible direction, I think. So yeah, I'm very excited for this finals, and I'm very excited for the future OCCs for people to sort of expand and reiterate on these decks that we've seen here today.
Yeah, I had a blast this tournament. Love to see how good Shibata was. Shibata was as good as I thought it was going to be. That's the one card that I didn't underestimate. um, but yeah, we'll definitely be watching from the background. But thanks for having us, and we'll be throwing it to our other co-casters.
All right, we are back. Team Heavy back in the house for the finals here. You can see our bracket. We've got Green Lemon versus No and 5. How are those bracket predictions doing? Throw those up in chat as well so we can grade and laugh at those. But an excellent finals here that we are poised to be able to witness here between Green Lemon and No and 5. No and 5, of course, been here many times. Green Lemon has some excellent tournament wins under his belt, but I don't believe he has an OCC. So, possible first OCC championship for him. What are you looking for in this matchup, Corn?
No and 5 already dispatched a Legions list. Can you do it again? Probably.
All right, that's a good point.
That's it.
This is, of course, our finals, so I believe we have no bands, best of 5. I believe is the format here. So, uh, you're gonna have to get a win with every deck. You are not able to ban the thing that seems to wreck your lineup. How do you think Green Lemon deals with that as someone who has definitely way less experience with a no ban? Like no ban is usually reserved for the finals, or it's sort of maybe like a more rare format. So this is definitely something Noan has dealt with far more, I think, than Green Lemon. Do you think that has an effect in this final set?
I don't think there'll be an issue for either player. I think no one's lists are pretty consistent in what they're trying to do. So there should be less variance in the strategy. Green Lemon can definitely pull it out, but it's going to come down to how much burn damage will he take on the Shibatas. As we've seen Shibata be doing stuff like that today.
A lot of today is coming down to how much damage Shibata is doing or not doing. That definitely seems to be the case, which is interesting because you'd think Frontline didn't fare very well today, but Frontline having very few orders, right? Maybe a strap bomb, maybe a stars and stripes, not much else. But you'd think that would be a nice counter, but that didn't fare so well today in for the people that brought Frontline.
Yeah, we'll see. Green Lemon has a flexible lineup. Um, we'll see how Japan can fare. Um, that to me is going to be the crux of it. But Brit Ramp and Frontline, are no slouches, and I'm not expecting any real issues on that front. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, man, it certainly feels like it could go either way, as you sort of alluded to. But we hope for an excellent set here. The variety of decks is definitely interesting. Shibata, obviously the biggest mover post patch, but a lot of pack 40s today as well. Pack 40 being a Flampanzer +1, essentially, right? Or Flampanzer at 2 cost instead of 1 cost, but costing 4 instead of 3. But also maybe being a 2/2 Artie with um, ambush, if I don't forget my entire life before my eyes. Maybe a little nicer than a 3/3 tank with the 2 op cost. Flampanzer Flampanzer is decent for sure, but the operating it is, a big pain. Throwing around 3 damage for 2 op doesn't feel great. So pack 40 sort of taking that over is pretty interesting.
Brit Ramp, how are you feeling about it?
More tools, right? The Cromwell coming back is another nice guard for it. Brit's had, since Seaforths went away a long time ago, Brit has sort of lacked that guard in the 4 slot. For some reason, Green Howards was just never embraced. You'd see it maybe like here or there, or I don't know, some other people might have a better point for this, but like Green Howards maybe was just the decks that would use Green Howards weren't favored in the meta when Green Howards was like new, but that one certainly didn't catch on. So I think there's something to be said for the heavy armor on the Cromwell. Heavy armor on a guard is really nice. It gets retreated less, right? But then again, like things like half track aren't super relevant. You see way more M10s. So the text is nice with the pin tech. But is there anything else from the patch that you've been really playing a lot of, seeing a lot of?
Um, there's a lot of cards that I think are either fun or good or both, and I really like that coming out. Uh, One thing that
The
has been
fun and good
brewing,
ones.
if anyone in chat wants to crack the code, we got Royal West Kents, we got Cromwell. Let's get London Brigade going, and let's get this Brit London Brigade guard deck. Let's crack that code. It's there. You
We're
could
putting a
be
bounty out for
you
someone to
could be
figure
in the
that deck out.
finals of the next OCC right here with me praising you that you took my advice.
After your round 1 loss. uh, Another half hour to get those qual games in. World Championships coming up. You will see the likes of many of us, including all of these OCC winners. Of course, even today's OCC win, if Green Lemon were able to pull it off, he would not have to play that online qual that he missed out on today because of today's tournament. He could blissfully ignore that with a free ride to the top 128 Swiss pools. We are just getting a couple of technical things on our back end sorted. We do apologize for the delay. We should have the finals for you shortly. All
No
right,
in
we're going to take a
5.
quick look at Noen's decks. So we see here right away, you can see those little shields indicating cards that came back from the reserve pool, that pack 40 that we talked about. Only one of them but we do see the full stack of Shibatas, and we've seen them and the havoc that they cause today, basically all day. But otherwise, we see a really strong regular old Jagro, German ally, some big boys on the top end with your Dragon Slayer, your Shiden, your Panzergren. Then we, of course, move on to a German US, and there's a third deck there as well. But we've seen those decks all day. We finally have the match ready for you, everything rolling, so we are going to get right into it. Looks like German against US to start out here. Both players
Putting the
taking
pack
a
40
hard
back.
choice. Yeah. Turn 4 kind of a while away.
True. True.
I was going to say, I can't imagine keeping this Enigma. So, and then we see, no, now considering the full mulligan. 15 off is a pretty decent keep. Turn 2. Can't go wrong with that. And he is going to find a bank as well. Lemon start a little slimmer.
No one is going to the moon with his credits. Big moon fan out here.
Interesting to see the For Freedom go on to the infantry, and Lemon decides against it, instead throwing both into the front line. Of course, the draw for the Jaeger revolves on the scout car, so no one would really like to see that scout car go out before the Jaeger so he can pick up his draw. The Alf is a decent play, but no one, he wants to ramp here.
Yeah, why not just wait for the bank, and then if you have 2 credits left on your pop off turn, just cash them in for a credit slot.
Very sound reasoning, I'd say.
Especially facing down, some early pressure. Just
The thoughts of a true banker.
I'm
And we
card
see
carry
that
bank.
extra sneaky 0 cost. And that is going to...
Surprise, no one. If you ever played against no one in a tournament, you should have expected that countermeasure was pooled and
Yeah,
activated.
I'm a little confused at how that played out, though, because the 2 damage still went off, but I thought that it should come down suppressed, but the 2 damage went off? I may just have something confused there, I'm sure.
So the priority would be deployment effect, then countermeasure.
Right, that makes sense.
And then the countermeasure just takes a Mr. Eraser to
Yes, things like Blitz and
card
the like.
text.
Yeah. Sometimes I'm a little slow. So for freedom here being considered for perhaps the trade. That not only prevents No and 5 from being able to make the trade easily, but also prevents giving up that credit. I'm sorry, giving up a draw as well. Another Alf.
No one has all the credits, but that's about it. He's
And that War Machine is very nice,
saving the
holding
banks.
all of the banks.
I guess you don't necessarily want to play a bank and hope that you draw something meaningful to play on the next turn. It's not just kind of like a bank and hope. You want that FDI insured next turn. But at a certain point you just have to go for it.
Now, how does Green Lemon approach this now? This could be a very deadly
Duty, not in play.
Envelop in play here. And looks like Green Lemon is really considering it, knowing that he's about to maybe lose the 3-2. Yep, he'll take the draw off of it. He'll keep his 6-2 alive. He'll keep his PIR alive. Really, really great. Seeing a German player play an Alf and then float 3 credits is just like, yeah, okay. Thank you. The envelop, thank you. Okay. I get it. But, when you can bank all the way to Leo on turn 6.
Leopold. Let me say it one more time. Leopold is here.
Not the cleanest way to take care of it in just this turn. Shouldn't be too hard next turn with things like the Pathfinders, the Strat Bombing, the Stars and Stripes, and even the Hellcat or the Panzer. Should hopefully be
That
able to get enough onto that
Leopold is
Leopold.
a dead artillery walking, but it's good for 6 damage on this turn.
Yeah, no one probably doesn't want to spend 3 to kill that pack. But he's gonna. Doesn't feel great, but it does get the job done.
We
Yeah,
got
and a nice
Stars and Stripes.
combination here. Stars and Stripes for 2 damage to each, and then be able to finish off the Leopold.
And guess what? No hit the drop this time around on that Pathfinders.
It'll be interesting to see if Noen considers playing some of these draw tanks and thinking, if these come back to my hand, that's not the worst thing ever. Not a great time for the Enigma.
Double bank. Double bank.
Double
Double
bank.
bank. Double bank. Let's
Double
go.
bank in play. We're spending money. Ooh,
I got
there's
my
going to be a
money in the
comma on
bucket.
the credit counter.
No inflation here, just banks. We got Agent Cody Banks. Shout out Agent Cody Banks.
Green Lemon taking the front line with some big, beefy boys just doing some
Oh
damage,
no,
keeping his
oh no.
5-4 back, his PIR buffing.
And there's no Alpenfestung to bail no one out. Can he find it on the search? No one finds it. No one
Of
has to find it.
course. The
No,
easy bomber mafia.
but he needs to find the Alpenfestung.
Oh, that's true. Strat bomb in hand for Green Lemon still has not been played. I wonder if
Green
no one
Lemon.
is thinking about basically the only burn from hand that is in the entire deck for
Green,
US. Does he
Green
have
Lemon
it?
saw a double bank and said, "Rut-row, gotta go fast," and he
It's
did.
true. It was a good response.
True, if he could have got the gunship
Draws.
mission,
Blitz doctrine.
off of the bomber could have potentially been an out.
But yep, that strat bomb will take it. And as you said, Lemon saw, no one spend 6 out of, I believe, 9 credits on a double bank. Couldn't really do much else or didn't have much else to do. Decided to kind of throw it all into this huge pop-off turn, a 20 credit turn. So Green Lemon decides to smack that health total down that turn as fast as he can and puts no one in a hole that he's not able to climb out of.
I think this is a good victory for the viewers, which means they get to see no one play Reichsbank again, and there's possibility of another double bank is still on the table.
So now Noen thinking that he has legions to go up against and ramp. So where do you go from here if you're Noen?
you got to play the German deck again. It was banned twice for a reason. No one's, pretty consistent on these type of lists. He also wants to get it against Japan Legions for sure. Um, yeah,
And he does, Corn. You have called it correctly once again. He goes back to the well to that very strong German deck. One that he feels very comfortable on, one that you mentioned has been banned, so other players definitely have a proper amount of respect for it. And Green Lemon, considering his ramp hand here, sure to keep the War Machine. Keeps the whole hand. Says he likes what he
Oh.
sees.
and man,
And knowing 5 for sure are gonna register that he didn't mulligan a single card. We'll see both players. War Machine on turn 2. This is a game.
the machine of war is activated. No in 5. Gonna have 5 credits on turn 4, thanks to War Machine.
Kind of only has Spitfire here unless he wants to draw. Would probably just draw regular. Could maybe just take the credit instead. Does not have the leftover credits to get the draw off of the America, or and chooses to just go with the big plane, and we will see no one have an answer for that.
It's gonna be Jaeger into artillery into United We Stand for a lot of fun.
How do you feel about playing United We Stand against? Because like Noan is a way less traditional ramp deck. It's certainly less rampy than what Green Lemon is playing. Green Lemon with a far more top end. So do you feel that there's like an inherent danger in something like United We Stand that ramps both players?
No. Um and you kind of needed it so that you didn't have a Spitfire with Fury on the board.
Oh yeah, you
Um
absolutely make the play. The unit has to die, but just the kind of contextualized ramping of both players when you have maybe the less heavy ramp deck. Are you burning your own candle at both ends?
yeah, it's definitely been something that players have been avoiding doing since that card was reworked, namely trying to avoid giving the opponent the credit since they get to use it first in terms of um, they get to use it next turn before you get to use it this turn. So
No one probably very astutely and correctly anticipating this carpet bomb, so he does not throw that 35T out. He is going to keep that back.
the carpet has been bombed. Time for the tanks to come out and play.
Yeah, nice turn here. The 38T first. We're going to see what we draw. If we don't draw anything good, we can go right into that big Panther A. Something that Green Lemon is going to want to deal with immediately. Does not want to suffer the draw denial, but looks like he's gonna.
Gonna have to, as they say.
Considered maybe for a second taking his 1 in 3 opportunity. And instead we'll just kill the 38T, that draw tank from before. And then that was 15 offs. They can't really be undersold here. Just giving no one access to all sorts of strange tools that Green Lemon has to consider.
What will he pull from Bomber Mafia when it is played? No one definitely winning on board. Lemon
The
has a lot of AoE removal, but none in hand after Carpet Bomb played last turn, and we're not going to see a draw, at least a normal draw.
Doctrine coming into play really nicely makes that 35T a 3/3 perfect for Wellington killing.
Indeed, indeed.
Takes the Noxshib off the board, makes the trade, but that big 6/4 left in the front line is definitely scary. But we've got guards and we've got bomber mafias, so probably only suffering that 6 damage one time, and no one gonna bank.
Pretty
Countermeasure
telegraphed.
is
Pretty telegraphed.
countermeasure pretty telegraphed here, but still something. With a ramp deck like this, it's hard to play around it because if you feel you're donating a unit to it, all of your units are good. You don't really take any. It's not the ramp deck's way to take cheap 1-drops. And we will see the Night Hunters. Still gets the health. Still has the Cromwell. And obviously another Bomber Mafia sets up real nice for next turn. Until it doesn't. Knowing with a nice buff. And spreading some units out. Because he also knows that ASW is something that Green Lemon is packing in the deck. Could draw at any point.
Man, moment of tension here. This is turning into a heavyweight bout right now. What are we talking about? This this aggro meta. This is a heavyweight bout, front and center.
And the new Banshee making an appearance. The deal damage to target enemy equal to your unspent credit slots. And that is what he goes with.
Big time Banshee believer.
It is a pretty cool change to that card. It is definitely more relevant now than ever before. Will it see some real tournament-like relevance? Sort of remains to be seen.
You have to imagine it will. I mean, certainly it's going to be a priority pickup from Bomber Mafia.
Yeah, just any kind of removal, hard removal on a unit can definitely be devastating. A stranglehold pickup in a ramp game could be disgusting. We'll have to see what Green Lemon goes with. Not fully telegraphed by any means. Only 1 credit out of 2.
Pack 40? Not looking like
Oh no. The Cromwell is going to be an 11K stranglehold. Chooses to draw first. Oh, thank God we're on team draw first.
let's go.
Doesn't choose to ramp. He's certainly not thinking about it. Certainly not playing around it here. Gonna do a wild amount of overkill to get that unit out of the game, but that's okay. Doesn't want to see Heinkel draw, and he'll only lose 6 credits to Stranglehold, which frankly could have been quite worse.
Breakthrough has certainly been the unsung hero of this balance patch, in terms of dealing 3 damage and offering 1 credit reduced is so powerful and so strong. And here's a free tip. In a Pauper matchup, Breakthrough, very good California counter.
There you go. Probably a really good California counter in general for those of you watching in the ranks, maybe above 7 to 8. All of our free-to-play kings out there and queens.
Free to play warriors.
Very nice, able to throw the ramp down first, making wave after wave. Do 4 instead of 2, gets that nice board clear. We get the Cromwell out without losing 11 credits, which feels nice. Leopold, not a great play. You don't really care about shoving a Cromwell back. And at this point, you wonder if Noen is still thinking about that original Bomber Mafia.
And really, Blitz Doctrine in these later scenarios can really shine with one card producing 2 units and a permanent buff for them coming out. I do really like it in this exact scenario where you're coming in late to the party and just saying, you know what, I'll make up for it with some tank buffs.
Yeah, crazy amount of value. And we also saw Noen able to pull off a really nice Enigma on the turn before that was really able to refill the back end of his hand and kind of get him into this position that is looking more and more advantageous as we go here.
Big Flying Fortress coming down, going, welcome. I see
And
that
here
Leopold
I would
in your hand.
imagine we see Sexton. No, we don't. We just throw the Crom up. That also makes sense.
Evasive action. I realize how much I missed that card. Imagine you're bringing one invasive action to this matchup, and you're just hoping that you catch the Leopold.
Catches the for freedom, but not quite gonna matter here. We're gonna blitzkrieg up to 9 no matter what. In fact, I believe he was playing around the ultra. In fact, he was setting up that blitzkrieg. Silly of me to see it slowly, knowing obviously knowing what he's doing. Uh, you know, we've spoken about the experience playing to his outs. Knows exactly how much he needed there. Not gonna miss an easy lethal. So as you said,
So
he would probably go back to that German deck because it was so good. Where do you think he goes now?
yeah, that's got to be the question. Because what do you want your sorry, what and now it's revealed, but what do you want your Brit ramp list to go up against? You know, you have the full Royal West Kent's stack. You have one Cromwell. You have the Canadian division. That's got to be the pick. What I was going to eventually decide. Um,
Yeah, we'll see both players go Brit here, which means one is trying to go fast and one is trying to go rich.
and turn one Shibata, um, definitely not what Lemon was hoping for, but it's not, the end of the line here. We're gonna take 2 damage to get a credit slot.
And next turn we might be taking 2 more damage to get another credit slot. Meanwhile,
And
Nolan is going to be putting out planes and making them bigger.
yeah, um, no need to frontline that Shibata yet. Just take the 2 damage. Um,
Green Lemon drawing more ramp in this situation. Painful.
what I like about this Brit list, this Brit air list from no one, is it's looked pretty reasonable in the consistency that it's been drawing. I'm sure if I copy this list and queue up some games, I'm gonna get flooded or something with my normal luck playing Brit Air, but he's making it look like, hey, you can curve out on this list. Don't worry about bad draws. That's just bad lists. This is a good list.
And we've spoken at length sort of about Shibata and the impact it has because of its card text, but that brings into play its impact as just like a 1/3 infantry body. One of those things with air having, so many orders. You got to take some of those orders out. You put in 4 more 1 drops, and now you're just even more likely to see, you have full stack of swordfish, full stack of gladiators, full stack of Shibatas. Very, very likely that you're seeing 1 drops. So you're probably almost never burning your turn 1. And if it is those Shibatas and it's not the air units that you want, that's okay because you're probably getting a little bit of burn damage as they get their stuff going.
So Lemon needed a Wrath Lightning as his out here, and he did not find it. Spitfire would have been nice too, but it wouldn't have lasted. No one is gonna be walking away with this one, you have to imagine. And we're gonna get to see this Brit list with its guards versus no one on Jagro. However, Jagro list also has Shibata, so could we see a turn 1 Shibata? Could we see a turn 2 follow-up? That would be devastating for Lemon.
Lemon can buy himself a turn here by doing a Bomber Mafia Wellington play. Actually, no, it won't because of the Shibata. Of course, we'll take him down to 1 health. So the one bomber he's not able to kill is going to be lethal.
Yeah.
Shibata just not letting anyone escape.
Shibata hunts you down. Shibata makes you regret.
Yeah, this is so much talk for a 1-drop. This is so much just value and so much strategy and so much of these games sort of hinging or being influenced by these 1-drops. And not even like in a way where Air would normally be like, yeah, I do that all the time. I put down small planes, and by the end of the game, they're medium to large and they're bursting your face in. But this is just like, nah, this is just an infantry. It's just chilling back there.
Yeah, and we're gonna see it here again. There's no escaping. Shibata bing, Shibata bang, and it's already on the board, just like,
Yeah.
oh my
Oh, sweet
goodness.
God. Go
It's,
ahead, brother. Ramp. I dare you to ramp. I want you to ramp.
oh
I
my.
crave your ramp.
No one 5 and high rolling in OCC tournaments. Name a better.
Drawing more burn into his hands with that bombing raid that's going to help him possibly take out. Imagine not being able to go face with your 4/4 Hurricane Gladiator. Or, I'm sorry, Fury Gladiator, because you have to spend all that money killing Shibatas. But able to dodge most of the bullet here.
Yeah, I believe no one's only running 2. So we're looking at all of, or 3. No, he's running the full 4 package. So there's one more Shibata lurking in that stack somewhere.
He'll go 35T here. Throw in the cavalry. Destroy the plane. Now we're sitting pretty nice. Ooh, and a interesting Royal West Kent's play here to keep the bomber alive for probably a little while. At
Yeah,
least a turn.
you would love to ramp to be able to put yourself in range for Bomber Mafia. Um, however, you would not love to ramp for 4 damage here, I'd assume.
Knowing with a plethora of choices here, you can't really. You normally probably just go Jaeger and kill the bomber, but Royal West Kent's kind of makes that a different play. He could still kill it with the pack. I don't believe that would kill the Royal West Kents. I believe that would kill the. But I'm unsure of how that interaction works at this stage. Bombing raid also.
No one's out here
Decent
looking
play.
like looking in prime form like perhaps other, cards players such as like Baron von Glower who are just at the, the peak of their powers right now.
Oof. Drawing more and more burn. All of the top half of his deck he gets his bombing raid and his desperate measures. He's got a big old plane to throw out, and of course, a good old fashioned German Sherman. It's looking mighty fine for no and 5 right now. Canadian division's going to be helpful though.
Havoc will die to desperate measures. We just don't know it yet.
Two 35 Ts here to go off of the recon. We only need to trade one of them into the sexton. Can desperate for the board clear. That's going to be 4 total damage to face at least. May even still have a credit left over. Could
You could
possibly
just go
even
face here with the 35 Ts as well, instead of even just ignoring the sexton, because you have so much.
It's true. And I was going to say that 1 credit left over. Great for that combined arms to really push this damage up.
But why not just trade it out and just lock in that control? It's gonna be a win-win decision.
Well, no, I believe it at this state with this board. I think I agree with you. I would take my 4, 5, 6, 7 out of 10 damage. Kill the havoc and just leave him injured.
Yeah, I mean, there's a chance that women could guard it with the Canadian, or perhaps a bigger guard, Glamour Boy coming out. Yeah, so slamming Glamour Boy, you
Plays
definitely had to
both of
kill
them.
the Sexton. Um, so the greed would have been punished. A big Dragon Slayer in hand doesn't need to come out yet. Lemon is on the back ropes. Would love to find a Lend-Lease. Unfortunately, Lend-Lease is rotated.
Now we're gonna see that desperate. It's gonna get rid of one of these guards.
You'd love to kill the Canadian division before it can salvage a card. There we go.
Yep, the Hyokusu, and again another Glamour Boys. Green Lemon able to
Ramp to 12.
keep clawing. He does ramp to 12. Probably figuring just if I can get this out with no Shibata, I might as
He's
well. But
playing
yeah,
around
was
Enigma.
unfortunately useless there.
He's playing around Enigma,
Another
but unfortunately, no one doesn't have Enigma.
another big play, another big card. Buff Wagon. It's gonna make this trade much cleaner.
Oh, Glamour Boy. Oh, Glamour Boy. How can I go right through you? Oh, Glamour Boy. Oh, Glamour Boy.
And Green Lemon probably was not thinking about using the Lancaster to face because obviously 5 face damage doesn't help, making these units or no one's cards 1 extra damage doesn't really help, or I'm sorry, 1 extra credit cost. But the Dragon Slayer just does this huge body.
Carpet Bomb will not save Lemon here.
Yeah, it's going to have to be Lancaster, and that's not going to be it. The Buff
It would,
Wagons buffing each other.
it would have to be America War into.
Well,
I mean, Glamour Boy
Glamour
can
Boy.
delay, but you next turn you really want a.
Oh, the sheet and top deck were truly
We're
truly
truly
out of answers here for Green Lemon. He's not going to be able to claw this back.
you're gonna want Convoy into. Never mind. Finds the
Yep.
lethal.
Finds it here and now, and that will be a finals victory, 3-1 for No and 5 in a pretty quick, fast-paced set. Given kind of what we're seeing from this, newly developing meta, but I think there's a lot of stories of the day. No one's play and experience coming out on top for one, but then also just how much of an impact that Shibata is making right now.
Couple takeaways. Aggro when crafted and piloted well, it's good. Shibata, pretty good.
Yeah, no
And
one's the only player to bring Jagro. No one's the only player to win the tournament. So probably something to be said there. Jagro looking strong in just about all of the games I believe it played. So really nice to see from no one. Let's take a look back to our final bracket. our champion, 0-5, with that 3-1 finals victory. Of course, if you've been here with us the whole time, you saw Spoker defeat Head, Green Lemon defeat Rook, 0-5 defeating Dark on his way, and M4N defeating Tanshan. And then our very nice semifinals matchup, Green Lemon taking it over Spoker and 0-5, and then 0-5 winning our final here. Back on top on another OCC. 0-5, never going too long without bringing down an OCC victory. Hopefully your prediction bracket looks something like this. I think that there's probably a lot of prediction brackets that had 0-5 as the champion. So there's a good chance you got that far, but all those little ones in between, probably not so much. How did your bracket do?
Big shout out to the other co-casters who did a great job, and I am definitely ignoring how my bracket did.
Really no sold that one, yeah. But yeah, credit to everyone today, to the production team, all of the casters, and especially our players. Really great tournament and really fun to see how this is all shaping up. We are only 2 or so weeks post patch, and it is going to continue to ripple through this world championship season that is so exciting for all of us cards players.
Viewers, you got some free decks for your World Quals escapades coming up.
That's
So
true.
hopefully you can profit from this. I'm sure it's been on your mind this entire broadcast.
All of the deck lists will be in the links in the Discord, especially the esports Discord. I'm sure it will be floated around elsewhere as well. As well as you can stand by and wait for Team Heavy member Hayes to put out some very interesting graph work on today's decks and on today's frequency for certain countries and certain deck archetypes. But it's been a tremendous tournament. We thank you for tuning in, and we will see you next time at the OCC.
3, 2, 1.